I call this special council budget retreat to order. May we have the roll call, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Truitt. Here. Vice Mayor Villanueva.
Here.
Councilmember Longabaugh.
Here.
Councilmember Alton.
Here.
Councilmember Williams.
Here.
Councilmember Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Hall.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome everybody to this budget retreat. We're scheduled to go till 5 o'clock, but if we're good, we'll be done at 4. And if we're very good, we'll be done at 3:30. So I'm throwing out the challenge. Seriously, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that the budget is appropriate for this coming year, and we appreciate everybody's participation. As we can all see, today is casual day. We've got a lot of work ahead of us. We want everybody to be comfortable, and we can dispense with the formalities and go to first names, feel comfortable just talking to each other, because these are such important issues. We want to make sure that we're communicating with one another as best possible. And instead of bringing foam balls to throw at each other, if anybody is giving me a headache, I will be throwing this Advil container, and you feel free to throw it back if you need to. That was a joke as well. So without further ado, I pass this on to City Manager Ferreira.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. As the Mayor mentioned, we will be here for 2 days, and hopefully 2 days is enough. We're going to have a whole lot to share with you, and we are presenting to you the 2009 proposed budget and also our 5-year forecast. I would say, from my estimation, this is one of the most important things that this body does, as well as staff. This kind of sets us strategically for the coming year, and then also forecasting out to 5 years to make sure that we maintain where we're supposed to be and continue to provide, efficient and effective service delivery to all our residents. So, as I said, this is, and we hope that we understand it's an aggressive schedule, but what we'd like it to be is also a very interactive session. We would like for you to ask questions, to make comments as we go along, to provide feedback. And one of the things that we are going to ask, though, is that in interest of time, because we have so much to do today, that if we get into a discussion that's kind of maybe a longer discussion, that we're going to utilize that flip chart in the back and basically use a parking lot concept where there's something that requires further discussion, that we would hold that to the end of the meeting, and then we can really get into some discussion related to that. One of the things that we've really tried to do, and understand that this has been a challenge, because our whole purpose is to make sure that when we put together a budget, that it does follow council direction, council policy. And one of the challenges has been, obviously, this is a brand new group pretty much. And so staff, you all, a lot of you took your seats in January, and staff was already in the process of working the budget at that time. They then got a new city manager in March. I came in after they had pretty much, we got to the place where it was time for the budget team to review those requests. And so I really want to thank the staff, because it is a really challenging, kind of time, and it does present some issues, I think, but I think they've done a really, really good job. And I really feel like, based on at least what I've heard, at least in the budget retreat and some of the things that I've heard historically, that we have done exactly that, and that we're presenting something that does and will meet with your expectations. Another challenge, obviously, no news to anybody. This is a very challenging economic environment, not only at the national level, but at the state level for cities and counties. And so it's been an interesting year. We've got many, as you know, state is facing a deficit of almost, well, now I hear over $2 billion. We've got cities and towns that, are dealing with it differently. Some cities and towns have actually reduced their workforce. Others have done other things in terms of going in and cutting back service levels. I can tell you that as it relates to Surprise, even though it has been challenged and we have seen better economic times, I think we are doing better than most. However, we have had our challenges. When you received this book a couple of weeks ago, we were at that point still looking at our revenues, and we did see some reduction in revenues, not only at the local level, but also at the state level. And we've accommodated that. And we've not only used that to take care of '09, but we've also looked at it in terms of that 5-year scenario. And that is very important because we want to make sure that not only are we holding you, stable and secure within that first year, but that we're also looking out 5 years and making sure that economically we're still in a good position. So what is being proposed to you today is a balanced budget. And again, in light of the times, we made sure that when we were projecting revenues, that we were conservative yet realistic. And a few things that I can share with you. For instance, a year ago, Surprise was building or issuing 2,000 permits. When we started out this process, we were projecting 1,000 permits. That number has been reduced, and that number is now 700. And we're holding that number for 3 years, and then it goes up a little. Also, our commercial square footage, in terms of what we were doing, was 2 million. That projection is 1.5 million. So we have looked at that and have reduced that. Also looked at our sales tax, and I'm going to have budget at a later time talk a little bit more about, in fact, a lot more about what they did with revenue and forecasts and things like that. We also are very cognizant of using one-time revenue for one-time expenses. Now, it's critical that we remember that whenever we're funding something, that we use our one-time for one-time only, and that we use ongoing revenue for ongoing type expenses. There is an opportunity now to use ongoing revenue for one time, and that's not going to hurt you. But when you start using one time to fund an ongoing expense, you can get into trouble very quickly. So that's one thing that budget has worked on very hard to identify and to do. We have maintained something that I think is important to all this council, is the operating reserve. This city has an operating reserve of 2 months revenue. That means that in case of a turn down, you would actually have 2 months to continue to operate the city. In my estimation, and that's my estimation, and I've heard others say the same thing, that might be a little low. You might at some point consider a longer a time, but it is a very it's very respectable. It is, I think, the minimum best practice standard. So we have followed that. We have limited any recommendations for staff to high priority areas, and we'll talk a little bit about that. As I mentioned before, we are committed in the process to look at what the mayor and council direction is and to follow that. The recommended budget for total budget is $276 million. $118 million of that is for ongoing expenses, and that funds all our operating areas, and the others $158 million in one time. And basically, that a lot of that represents your capital improvement projects. So the council does have some significant expenditures in that, but you're going to have some assets that are just going to be just a real addition to this community in terms of City Hall and others. So all in all, we have a relatively flat year. Initially, when we looked at the general fund, for instance, and that's because that's our general operations, we were projecting almost $1 million deficit. Very quickly, we realized business is not as usual. So we looked at what we were doing in funding ongoing expenses. And one of the things that we've traditionally funded is a cost of living for employees. We funded a merit, and we funded a pay for performance. Very quickly, we made a decision. As a manager, I made a decision that we would fund a cost of living. And part of the reason for doing that is that there has been an interest on this council, past councils, that employees would be at the 75th percentile of their market. By doing a cost of living, that still maintains that. Now, what you wouldn't have, you would have your range, but then you don't have the movement within the range for that particular year, but you would still be within that 75th percentile, and you retain your competitiveness within that market. The other reason, because we talked about, should it be pay for performance? Should we do a one-time bonus? Should, we talked about all those things, but, given what we are struggling with as a city in terms of these economic times, that is also being felt by our employees. We've had a small increase in health insurance. Hopefully that'll help them with that. Fuel costs, everybody is hurting, and our employees have to get to work and they have to, go home. And so, that was hopefully something that we would consider in terms of, are they able to still buy the same basket of goods? And that's all cost of living reflects. The other consideration is that folks have made commitments in terms of mortgages and things like that. So we wanted, folks to be able to remain competitive in that area as well. We also, and just so you know, in the process of putting together a budget, everybody was asked, all the directors, to look at their base budgets. There are no automatic inflationary increases to the base budget. In other words, if you have supplies and services, anything like that, we don't, and some cities do, they will add an automatic inflationary increase, because we ask our directors to look within their budgets and to try to find within their budgets if there were increases. If they weren't able to do that, then we ask them to submit a supplemental for that. So just so that you understand that we have looked at the base. It's not a zero-based type of budget, but we go back and always look at the base and make sure that not only that we're maintaining service levels, but also there might be opportunities to change what we're doing to better deliver the services that we're delivering. In the general fund, the proposed budget only includes a net increase of 2.7 positions, and these positions are in the high priority areas such as police and fire, finance, and a position in the mayor council budget. There's in the public works area, there's one position, and that was a position that was funded in previous years by a grant, and that's the REACT incident management position. The largest increase in terms of our operating budgets was in the water services area, and that. Now let me talk a little bit about how we were even able to fund a net of 2.7, because in looking at our budgets and evaluating what we have been doing, we eliminated 6 positions within community development, and that's directly tied to obviously a very slow decreasing housing market. So that those positions were eliminated and were able to then kind of backfill for the other positions that we're proposing. As I said, the largest increase was in the water services area, and that's an increase of 21 positions, but that is directly related to bringing in-house the water operations area, which is currently in contract with Arizona American. I'll talk just a little bit about the operating increases in the general fund, and we'll get into those when Michael and his folks talk. But we had about $180,000 in, I believe, additional operations for the new city hall. We've got an increase in sanitation, information service, always working to stay competitive and up to date in that. That's a very challenging field. The fuel area obviously was something that we increased, and then there was a dispatch contract in the fire department. Again, can't emphasize enough, I guess, that we have looked at the base budgets. They were evaluated for opportunities for distribution, and that no inflationary increases were received. We had a total of $14 million in requests from our departments, and obviously we funded a small percentage of that. And the available funding, and this has been changing as we've had new word from our state chair or whatever, but I believe that the available ongoing was 1.7 million that we were able to fund, and the one time was 2.1 million. And again, that was out of $14 million worth of requests. So I believe, again, that the recommendations are consistent with the council priorities. And again, this is a balanced budget. So one thing that I would ask is that as you look at what we've done, and if you find that, there was something that we missed or something that you want to see happen, that you put that before this group, and that remembering that it is a balanced budget. So if you put something up, you have to take something away. So that's kind of the major ground rule, because we didn't hold back any dollars. They're all on the table. And So that would be something that we would ask that you do. We, as the mayor mentioned, CIP will be presented tomorrow, so we thought just it would be better to kind of keep the operating, together and then talk about CIP. So tomorrow we will be talking about CIP, and unless we have to go over and finish whatever we started today, but I don't think that's the case. And with that, I really want to thank Michael and his group. They've been great. The two assistant city managers, I mean, their help was invaluable. They've been here through it all, and so they have, obviously the background and the expertise. So that was extremely helpful to me, and the department directors, because they've done an excellent job of, realizing these times have changed. I mean, it is different for right now, and whether that's for 1 year or the next 2 or 3 or 4 years, we don't know. But I know that they're committed to make this work, and obviously to mayor and council for their patience and their input and everything that they've done, and obviously that they'll do to make this successful. So with that, Mike.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. If I could get you all to turn to page 1 of your budget document. We're going to start there. And I need you to look about, the second paragraph in where it says the surprise FY09 recommended budget totals, $281 million. I need you to change that. I need you to scratch that out, and I need you to put 276,008,700.
One more time, please.
276,008,700.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Michael, can you speak a little louder?
Certainly.
Or can we turn up the volume on the speakers?
Thank you.
The reason I've asked you to change those numbers is Jared is handing out some additional information for you, and that's going to show you the information as far as fund balance analysis for the general fund. And if you were to wait for just a second here. Does everybody have their handout now? If you were to look at the first section of information, and this is also available for the public here on the front table. You see the total that says 104,197,700, top right-hand corner? Okay, now turn to page 7 of your budget books. That amount matches the information also included in your budget book. So that shows you the total, and we're going to work from there. Again, the first section here, the first block of information is what was included in your budget books. As we work through the resources, again, we take into account what we were going to receive from local sales tax, indirect costs from the enterprise funds, work down to the expenditures where you see the $77,543,900. That would be our base budget. We take that into account. We move down the operating for transfers out. We get to a total net expenditures of $80,788,400. If you to look at that line right below it, it shows us a net fund balance of $2.4 million. That money we had available was because of the reductions in the base budget. That would have been, again, the elimination of some of those positions. It freed up some additional funding for us to be able to approve new supplements, new services, ongoing services. If you go across next to that, we had $11.2 million available for one time. So we had a total of $13.6 million of funds to do things in the FY09 budget. As you move to the next step down, there's the recommended supplements. Those are the items that are going to be discussed. Those are the recommended items from the manager's office for fiscal year 2009, totaling about $2.1 million. Right below that is the transfer out. We had $242,300 available after all the supplements were looked at. We took that funding, that ongoing money, and transferred that over to general capital to be used as one time. So you go to the column right next to that. We recommended $2.6 million of one-time items. We also transferred out $8.5 million to general capital. So that presented to council a recommended budget when these books went out to them, the budget books. Since the books came out, we had the changes in state shared revenue, And we also had an additional change from the Department of Revenue, and they all said, revise your numbers. State share is going to be lower, the sales tax is going to be lower, and we're going to take the hit for that. And you can see on the operating side, the $502,500, we had to take that hit right up front, and then we had the $572,300 of one-time hit. Again, that's related to the investments. So after the books came out to you or went out to you, we had a deficit of about $1 million, $1.1 million that we had to find and bridge that gap. So what we had to do is right below that section there, and we start revised fund balance right below there. We talk about the transfer revision. So the first one was campus operations. There were some items in there that were one-time that we were funding with operating. So we changed that to reflect more accurately what we're doing. We're going to fund it with one-time instead of operating. So that's out there to the right as a zero. We also had to reduce or increase the transfer to HERF because of the reductions in the state shared revenues. Below that is the transfer revision to general capital. We had to revise those transfers because of that reduction, and that directly impacted the land purchase item that was in the CIP. And we'll get to that later on tomorrow. Then we had to find additional funds, and we made some revisions or reductions to the public defender line item. Historically, management budget has overseen that line item and the management of those contracts. We haven't spent all of the funds that are in there, so there was room for some reductions. So we've recommended reductions in that area. We also had to reduce other items in general operations to the tune of $75,000. And again, those were related to potential studies that could have been conducted by the city manager's office or by council. So what it ends up being is we still have a balanced budget, but we did have to take some reductions in certain areas. It's not going to affect the delivery of services that the residents are going to receive or it directly impact necessarily any of the departments in their service provision. We've worked with them to handle some of the hits, especially in the HERF area. So ending balance, as of today, we still have a balanced budget. So again, as the city manager has mentioned, any changes that are going to come as a result of this budget retreat, there's going to be give and take. So if we're looking at adding some additional items, we're going to have to directly take away from the current budget. Do they have the handouts as well? Okay. I have a PowerPoint presentation for you as well. We're going to go over some of the information here as far as an overview. And what this slide represents, again, is the recommended budget for 09. It kind of it shows you the historic, where the city's budget has been as far as a recommended budget over the years. The 09 budget does not include any carry forwards, and that will increase that number significantly. Last year at about this time, we came to the council and we ended up with about $90 million of carry forward items. So what are carry forward items? Carryovers are items that won't be completed in this year, but they are budgeted. So they're one-time expenditures. They're for projects that are underway and may not have been completed, and they're going to be needed to carry forward. The remaining balance that we're anticipating at this point in time is about $124 million. That number will be reduced as we move forward in the fiscal year because projects, again, are going to continue to spend down money. So that number will reduce, but that's the starting point for today. So again, the item before you today, the FY9 recommended budget, is balanced. It's required by law to be balanced, and that's something that we submit to the state annually. This year's budget represents slow growth. The city manager has mentioned that the economy, local, national, state, has seen significant slowdowns in the housing market. We've revised our projections, as you've heard before, from 1,000 single-family residential permits being issued to 700. We've also seen our local non-construction sales tax increase about 4.5%. And again, our intergovernmental, which is the state shared revenues, we're seeing some small increases in that area as well. So again, slow growth is the name of the game for this fiscal year. We want to take into account for this year's budget operations of new facilities. We have the City Hall project, which we've budgeted for a third of the year to operate. That will directly impact fiscal year 2010 when we're fully operating that facility. So something to be aware of. We're also taking on Fire Station 307. and Surprise Farms Park. So we have to maintain those facilities and operate those facilities. One of the biggest operating items, is the water transition. The city manager has mentioned that we are adding positions in the enterprise fund for the in-house operations of the water system. And that was something that was decided by the council over the last year, and the staff is implementing a transition plan to bring that in-house. That's where you'll see over 20 positions being recommended out of the enterprise fund itself. We're also committed to completing projects that are underway. That's what this fiscal year 2009 budget represents. Things that are started, that have been under construction, we're looking to complete. We want to make sure that we're delivering those to the residents on time and on budget, and that's what this budget is representing. Acceleration of Bell Road. Again, committed to Phase 2, Phase 3, and expansion of the capacity at Reams Road intersection. That's all being recommended in this year's budget, FY09, at about $7.5 million. The general obligation bond is the last item I have up on there. Earlier, we came to you and talked about the idea of going with the general obligation bond for fiscal year 09. However, the city manager's recommended budget does not recommend going forward with a general obligation bond item to the voters until fiscal year 2010 or calendar year November 2009. So there are items in the CIP that contemplate funding from a general obligation bond, but that wouldn't be until fiscal year 2010. And we can work with council on developing a plan for community input, dialogue, and project development over the next year. When we meet with the council members, we go over the financial policies that drive the direction, the formation of the budget. And we've done this with you in briefings, and we're going to go over those again. Just some of the highlights. We want to make sure that everybody understands that the budget process is in place so that we weigh all of the competing requests against one another. Because we do have limited resources, finite amount of money, we need to make sure that all of those items are in the same pot and at least being reviewed for priority's sake. We don't want somebody being added mid-year or items being added mid-year. It basically takes away from what everybody would look at during this time. So all the items at once. The one-time items don't fund ongoing. One time does not fund ongoing. Pretty self-explanatory. The city managers mentioned that. We want to make sure that you understand that we can fund one time with ongoing. So again, you just don't want to get in the opposite situation. We want to make sure that we have diversified and stable revenue. That helps us overcome fluctuations in any one source. So if you see a downturn in one area, we want to make sure that we're strong in other areas. So that is something that's a policy and is always a goal for us as staff. We want to make sure that we're not dedicating revenues. That reduces our flexibility. So unless it's required by law or by council or generally accepted accounting principles, we don't want to do this. We do have some set-asides or dedicated revenues. That would be the 10% set-aside, the transportation improvement tax, which is the 1.5%, and then we have the 75% of the construction sales tax, which goes to capital. As a note, I have information from the Revitalization Board, who is charged with providing recommendations on the 10% set-aside. What we'll do is we'll hand that out to all of you to take a look at. Nothing that necessarily has to be acted on at this point, but throughout the day you can review it, and if you have questions, we can go over those later. And you can talk to the department director who is responsible for being the liaison to that board, which is Dan Lundberg out of Community Initiatives. I'm going to hand that out. User fees and charges. Again, we want to make sure that these are examined to make sure that they're recovering their cost. Obviously, there's items on items that are offered or programs that are offered that we may not want to recover all of our costs because we want people to participate. But we want to make sure that we are looking at those to recover the revenues as deemed appropriate by council, by the departments as well. Development, impact fees, development fees, and new development. We want to make sure that we're looking at these on a biannual basis. That's the impact fee studies. And we're making sure that we're updating so that development pays its fair way of growth, fair share, and that is it's actually representing the cost of construction. Grant funding. We want to make sure that it's leveraged in the best interest of the city. We need to be careful of operating costs that might be absorbed at a later date. An item of note that directly impacts this is the REACT program. In this year's budget, the city manager's office is recommending $100,000 for the REACT item. That program was started as a grant, and it started and the funding has stopped. So the city is left with a decision, a tough decision, whether or not we want to continue this program or not. The program was deemed as valuable, and so what we've done is we've added that program as a recommended item.
We were not going to be shrill in this budget retreat. So.
Okay. Financial policies continued. Again, we have the 5-year forecast. We want to make sure that our revenues and expenditures are examined to make sure that we can absorb any of the operating costs that we're putting into the budget. What I've got here on the slide is that analysis that we conduct on an annual basis. As you can see in the fiscal year 2009 budget, they're on point. We have just a hair of maneuverability here, $100,000 as far as revenues exceeding expenditures. Once we get out to fiscal year 10, 11, we're going to have to look at our base budget each year and make sure that we're not in a situation where the expenditures are over exceeding the revenues. Once we get to fiscal year 2012, that's where we receive our shot in the arm, so to speak, and the census information will be coming our way. We expect the population for the city to increase, and our revenues would also reflect that increase. From the state share revenues, we'd get an increase. And that gets us to a point where our revenues are over the expenditures. The council contingencies funds. These are $500,000 of funds that are programmed each year. The rationale behind these are unexpected expenditure increases, unanticipated events that threaten the public's health and safety. Typically, we want these items to be used for one-time expenditures so that we don't get saddled or put in a situation where we've added positions and then they're absorbed into the base budget going into the next fiscal year. Economic stabilization, the reserve. This is, again, has been talked about a couple of times here. 2 months of operating revenue. We want to make sure that that's taken right off the top. It allows us to be flexible if there's economic downturn. At this point, we're looking at about $13.3 million as far as the operating economic reserve for fiscal year 2009. Yeah, 13.3. The information on the slide, on the TV there, shows you the operating reserves, and we've broken them out by the funds so you can see how they look. Again, total reserves are about $26.5 million once you add them all up. The one that's usually reflected on the most is the general fund, which is $13.2 million. The budget adoption according to state forms, every year we submit to the state the city's budget. This is an example of the state forms and what it looks like. This is what we present to you as an agenda item when we bring the tentative budget. From the tentative to the final, it may change here and there based on the carry forward amounts. This, again, shows you what it looks like. As you can see, the bottom right-hand corner, that $452 million, that's the current fiscal year's budget. So just want to show you what it looks like as we bring it to you in the future. And again, we want to examine service delivery on an annual basis. Every year, as the city manager mentioned, we require the departments to take a look at their base budgets. Before putting in any requests, can you do it from your existing resources? If you put in a request for additional resources or programs, that basically is the invite for the manager's office and the budget staff to come in and take a look. If you can't find it, maybe we can. We don't like to get into those situations, but it does occur because we want to make sure that we're not increasing the base unnecessarily. So we want to make sure that we're looking at those services. And again, that comes to the point of looking out, contracting out versus bringing it in-house, those types of things on an annual basis as well. The next slide shows us our expenditures. And what we want to stress here with this slide is that we are going to only look at the blue section here, the ongoing. That's what we're talking about today. The one time will be discussed on Saturday. The senior staff is laughing at me right now, I'm sure. I enjoy all your time. Saturday and Sunday. The overview for the '09 budget, again, some of the major operating funds are the ones on the screen there. This makes up 90% of all ongoing expenditures. The other 5% is mostly risk management, street light improvement districts. Out of the number of operating funds, we have 88, and again, a majority of those are the street light improvement districts. Just a breakout, the next slide here, of the recommended budget, kind of the overview. Again, general fund, 67%. It's the largest portion of the pie. It's where we usually spend most of our time and gets most of the attention as we do the budget process and our reviews. So that is the overview as of this point. Any questions of the information I've covered thus far? Take that as a no. Okay? They have these. Next section we're going to cover is the revenue for fiscal year 2009. Our budget manager is going to hand out the PowerPoint for you to follow along on as well. While he's handing out that information, some of the things that we've been saying throughout the fiscal year 2009 presentations, as we've been coming to you, as we've also been talking to the city staff, is that we want to make sure that we're in a position where the city is financially viable for the long term, that we're sustainable in the future. It's not just a one-year issue, it's a 5-year issue. It's a 15-year horizon that we're looking at. We want to look at the long term. That's why we have the financial policies that say one-time revenues should be used for one-time expenditures, ongoing used for ongoing operations or expenditures. And again, the revenues that you're going to take a look at today with me is the revised projections. We've had to make revisions on the single-family residential and also on the commercial side. Again, we went from 1,000 single-family residential permits and projections to 700. The square footage for commercial, we went from 2 million down to 1.5. That's what this slide represents. When we put the revenues together, that's what drives these revenue projections. We look at inflation, where we put 1.5%. That's a conservative number. Again, we want to be conservative in our revenue projections, and that 1.5% represents that. Population, we're expecting to see about a 3.6% increase. Again, a fairly conservative number. That's a number that we work with the Community Development Department on, and who also works on a regional level with Maricopa Association of Governments to develop. This slide represents what we've seen historically and what we're projecting in the future. As you can see, in fiscal year 2005, that's when we were trucking along at 7,700 permits. Quickly, it goes down to this current year. The FY 2008 projected is actually 800. When we put the budget together, we thought it was going to be about 1,200. Projected, we're thinking still about 800 single-family residential permits. We've dropped off on those numbers to 700 for the next 3 years, 840 over the last 2. And again, that's something that can change. We're aware of that. But I think we want to be cognizant of what's going on, not just locally here in Surprise, but also in other cities across the valley. They're also seeing a slowdown. So this number is something that management and staff feel confident that we can continue to see as we move into the future. Population, again, this just represents the information we talked about earlier, the 3.4% increase, 3.6% increase on the average. Operating revenue by type. This shows you the largest breakout here is local sales tax, charges for services, and intergov, which would be the state shared revenues. Go back to that. Property tax is about 7%. We'll get into the actual figures for this as we move forward in the presentation. But again, just wanted to show you the overall representation of each of those revenues by type. Operating revenues by fund. Again, the general fund is the largest portion. You'll see the largest number of employees are also funded out of the general fund when taking a look at all of the funds. Again, we'll cover this as we move forward. Operating revenue by type, general fund. Again, local taxes is the lion's share of what we receive and depend on for the city's operation. That's the lifeblood. That includes a sales tax. That includes a local sales tax. The intergov, again, is the state shared revenues, charges for services. Again, exactly what they mean. Local sales tax specifics, 35% of all those funds. The operating, again, $26 million. Get to my notes here. Again, we rely heavily on this for the operations. If there's downturns in the market, that's where we're going to see it. That's going to hit us the most, and that's why we need to be adaptive and really react to those changes as quickly as we can, because we won't get in a situation where we're always in catch-up. Yeah, that's the 4.2 there. Is in there. And not in there. Yeah, okay, there it is. Yeah. As far as local tax, sales tax, again, historically, the darker color here, and then the lighter color is the projections. You've seen the steady upward climb. We had some changes in our accounting practices or way we account for things because we had changes in auditors, so there's a spike here in the way that we review this. So if you were to actually line this out, kind of goes like, it kind of flattens out a little more than what you would see there. But again, we're expecting the slowdown and kind of the slow and steady increase over the next few years. Intergovernmental is 32%. As I mentioned, majority of that is from that's state shared revenue. That's a large portion of money that we rely on from the state to distribute to us. So when the legislature talks about making reductions or possibly changing the formula for distribution, that gets us nervous, because that's a large amount of money that we rely on to pay for our operating or ongoing expenses. The auto lieu tax, I'll mention this for Assistant City Manager, that's the vehicle license tax. That's what everybody's a little more familiar with. And the all other includes the state fire insurance premium tax and the area agency on aging funds. Income tax. State shared income tax and all the ones that that we're going to review here, predominantly driven by the population. So when the census is done, whether it be a mid or special census, regular census, that impacts the revenues that the city is receiving. You can kind of see the step effect here as we went from a population of 38,400 up to the DES 88,300. You see that large jump in the revenues that we receive. And as I mentioned on that 5-year projection, you saw how the revenues kind of stay steadily climbing, but then take a larger jump. That would be when we receive the next information from the census, and that's what this block of numbers here represents. So it's a step increase over the years. You'll see that on the state shared sales tax again, distributed based on population, the larger steps. Auto lieu, the same thing. Charges for services. Again, these are the inspection fees, building permit fees, fire fees, program fees. Of course, you have the all others, which are meals, class fees, DART fees, things of that nature. Oops. Engineering inspection fees, again, have remained pretty constant throughout the changes in the market. One of the explanations we've come across at this point is during the early years, the city saw a tremendous amount of infrastructure being placed in for homes, but then now we've kind of seen that drop off and switch into more of the commercial or non-residential activities. So it's one of the explanations that we have at this point as far as why these have remained so steady or so constant over the years. When you compare that to the building inspection fees, this is what we get from the single-family homes or from the inspection that are related to homes. You see that large peak in 2005 when we did those 7,700 permits. That was the peak of time for us as far as collections, and then it's dropped steadily as we've issued less permits and as we project to have less permits in the out years. Franchise fees, these are the ones that we receive from APS, some of the other cable companies, and from our business licenses. Again, at $6.5 million, it's 8% of the total revenues for us. A large amount when you think about it in aggregate. And we've seen a steady increase in these areas as well, because the methodology, it's in your budget book as well, is projected population times the projected revenue per capita. So that's what that information represents. Property tax, 8% total revenues. Again, it's not a large portion of the revenues that we rely or depend on for operating, but it does add up once you look at that $6 million number. We've put the fiscal year 2009 rate on here for you. It's going to decrease. Again, we levy, because the state statute restricts the total levy to 2%, we levy at that 2%, the maximum annual increase, plus any of the new construction that comes in through construction or annexation. This is used for city operations. I want to make sure I stress that. This is what we use for operating or ongoing. The secondary tax, we've put that up there. This is used for paying off debt. As you can see, we're reducing that down to nearly 2 pennies. Again, that's because the obligation bonds, the debt that we have is going to be paid off rather quickly here. So that'll continue to drop as we move forward to fiscal year 2009. Again, just graphically showing you the primary property tax and what we expect to see as far as collections over the few years here, over the 10 years. Steady increase. And we have all the other sources, which we have miscellaneous, we have fines, forfeitures, and interest income from investments. Total operating revenue, again, $79,682,900. That is for operating, general fund only. Then we get into the enterprise funds. Again, run like a business. The funds that are derived from here come from the bills from the residents that are issued on a monthly basis. Again, we don't look to make a profit in these areas, and all the funds that are used or generated from this area are used in this area. So these are the enterprise funds that the City of Surprise has: water, replenishment, sewer, and sanitation. Water operations, again, projections are done by the number of annual bills per customer and the bills per increase in new customers. So this is what we expect to see. Again, a moderate increase based on what we expect to see in the market for housing and commercial and construction. Replenishment, again, over the years, this has kind of fluctuated. Some of the fees that used to go from water are now going to be attributed to this fund. So they used to be collected into water and placed into water. They're now going to be placed into replenishment. That's why you see the large spike here, the large increase from fiscal year 2007 to fiscal year 2008. Sewer operations, again, has steadily increased with the growth that the city has seen. Again, will flatten out with the slower economy and slowing construction. Sanitation, same deal there. The number of customers grows based on the number of homes that we are constructing on an annual basis. Some of the special revenue funds that we have for fiscal year 2009, the Highway User Revenue Fund, $6.3 million. We have campus operations at $1.5 and the transit at $471,000. PERF, again, the source of that is it's the gas tax, comes from the motor carrier taxes, vehicle license tax, registration fees, and that's then distributed to the cities after it's put into a pot of money based on population. Campus operations, we take into ticket sales and concession revenues. Do we have an update on that? Thank you. Some of the information that has been requested is Mark Coronado from the Parks and Recreation Department gave a presentation to the council saying that it's been a banner year for the city, which it has been in spring training. The FY08 budget amount we had was $1.175 million. The actual for FY08 has been a net of $1.2 million. So that's been a good year for the City of Surprise as far as spring training. So kudos to Mark and his staff out there at the campus. Highway User Revenue Fee Fund. Again, historically distributed based on population. And again, you're going to see that step increase that we talked about with the other state shared revenues. Again, as our population increases, our share of money also increases. Campus operations, historically, you see the fluctuation. And again, we'll take a look at what the actuals were, and then we'll compute that for next year as well. So we're going to continue to monitor these. We're expecting Mark to continue to deliver fantastic numbers in the future. As you can see, the increases all the way out to 13. So that's a quick overview or review of revenue. Mayor, Council, do you have any questions?
Michael,
Yes, sir.
700 permits. What's the contingency plan if, say, that drops to 300, 200, worst case scenario? What's the plan if those numbers drop?
Mayor, Councilmember Williams, what we'd end up doing is, as staff, we would get with management, we'd get with community development, and we would start reviewing the capital projects plan. The revenue that you're talking about that would be derived from the homes is majority of that is one-time revenue. So it would directly impact the capital improvements plan. And so we would come up with a game plan to, depending on the amount of loss and depending on what projects are out there, we would have to review the capital improvements plan, come back to council, and discuss what we would need to adjust.
Yep.
Are our numbers similar to other communities like us, say like a Avondale or a Goodyear, or on the East Valley, Gilbert, who had 2 permits pulled in a month?
Our numbers have historically been higher than other locations. Even when Gilbert is doing 2, yes, we're paying attention to that. They are a couple years ahead of us as far as their growth. We tend to look to them for those types of things. Does it put us on notice? Absolutely. It does put us on notice. And we want to make sure that based on what we have that's been platted or that's been brought into the community development department as potential development, we want to take a look at that and see if those are realistically going to move forward. And based on what we've seen from the staff, we've reviewed these numbers, that number appears to be achievable, that 700. We've been issuing permits at a pretty good clip. I think, give me a second here, information. For March, we issued 65 permits. And we're about 60 at this point for this month. So we're still issuing permits. We have developers like in the Asante area that are committed to issuing a lot of permits. At least that's what they're telling us. Whether or not the market can bear that, that's still yet to be seen. But we have a lot of projects that are basically at the go point. And so the 700, we believe, has been a conservative number that represents what can actually happen here in the city.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to cover expenditures next. And so you don't have to hear me all day. We're going to turn it over to Jared, who's going to take the next half here. And Jared is the budget manager, and I'm going to hand out information now.
Good morning. Like Mike said, I'll be going through the expenditures. Mike did a pretty good job there reviewing all the money we're bringing in, so let's start spending it. As a quick review, we talked about the budget. Right now, the recommended budget is $276 million. Again, that's going to change with carryovers and some other tinkering we have to do with the budget before it comes back to you for the tentative budget. How that $276 million breaks down, almost half of that is for capital. Of course, we also said we weren't going to be talking about one time today, so let's back up, take a look at this again. Ongoing is about 43%. That's what we're going to be talking about today. But remember that about half of our budget, more than half of our budget, is one-time expenditures. 46% is capital, so we'll stick to ongoing right now. A couple of the major factors that affected the operating budgets this year, we had a health insurance increase projected about 15%, which is almost $1 million. The cost of living that Priscilla talked about earlier in her presentation that we have in for the personnel is about $1.5 million. And then we have increases in the retirement that total about $735,000. When we look at the expenditures by type for the ongoing only, you can see almost 2/3 of it is personnel costs. We have 28% for services, supplies about 10%, and capital about 0.2%, and contingency of 0.4%. The contingency that you see there is the council contingency of $500,000. Later on, we're going to have all of the departments here going through their budgets, and we have it broken out by service area. Here you see almost a third is public safety, public works is 17%, and water services 15%, community and rec 13%, general government, which all of us lesser departments fall under, is about 15%. The requests that came in this year, you can see the recommended on top, about 2.7 net. This is for the general fund only at this point. The total requested was $11.7 million, so we are recommending about 10% of what was requested. The one time, you can see less than half is being recommended at this point. Total FTEs requested was 93 and a quarter. And again, that 2.7 net number includes a reduction of 6 positions from the community development department. All the other operating funds, the recommended amount, about $800,000 with 23.6 FTEs. The major item we have here is the water operations. We're transitioning the operations of water from Arizona American, who's currently doing it. City of Surprise will begin doing that. The transition starts next year. When we take a look at the water fund, when we look at the operating on the water fund, you'll see a little inconsistency there, and we'll talk about that when we get there. The total request was about $4 million for the all other operating funds for ongoing. 33 total FTEs were requested. Earlier, Mike had mentioned the major operating funds: general fund, campus ops, transit, HERF. I'm not going to try to trip over highway user. Water, sewer, replenishment, and sanitation. They make up 95% of the ongoing expenditures for the City of Surprise in this recommended budget. Let's take a look at the general fund. The 2009 recommended budget had a base of $77 million. The recommended supplements about $2.4 million. Transfers out of $3.1 million. The transfers out, when we talked about not dedicating funds earlier, the general fund can be used for just about any purpose for the city. So when we need to when we need additional resources in other areas, we can transfer money out of the general fund to the other funds. And the funds that we're transferring to include the 10% set aside, the campus operations are the two big ones. The total expenditures is about $86.6 million, which is a 5% increase over the fiscal year 2008. I sent around a second sheet that has the colored graphs there. I didn't want to print them out with the black background. That was going to kill our printer. So on page 1 at the top there, you see the general fund operations. On the left, you see the expenditures. On the right is the revenue. You can see that they are in balance. On the left, the blue, the large part, is the base budget. You have the recommended supplements in red, and at the very top you have the transfers out that total the $86 million that we talked about. The revenue, Mike had talked about the revenue that we were receiving, about, was it $79 million? We also have transfers in coming into the general fund. Those transfers in are from the enterprise funds for overhead costs, indirect costs is what we call it. It's to pay for finances efforts and for management and budgets efforts, the city manager's efforts, city council's efforts on behalf of those enterprise funds. So in order to make sure that they're run like a business and they're paying the total cost, we have this indirect cost that's charged to them, and we see that as a transfer into the general fund. Any questions on the general fund? 2/3 of the operating budget. Again, if any detailed questions about the requests, we'll be getting to the departments a little later. Campus operations, base budget of $4 million. Recommended supplements, none. Transfers out, none. The reason why there's no transfers out, we actually subsidize this with the general fund. Total increase is 3% over the prior year, mostly due to increases the cost of living and the health insurance that we talked about earlier. That's the second graph that you see on page 2 of the colored handout. You see the expenditures on the left side. On the right side, you see the operating revenue making up about $1.5 million. The other $2.5 million is made up with a transfer in from the general fund. Oh, I said page 2? Sorry about that. Page 1. It's the second one on page 1. I apologize. That's correct. That does not include the debt service on the stadium. The debt service or rent payment that we give to the MPC comes out of the Parks and Rec Development Fee Fund. Transit Fund, base budget of $880,000. Recommended supplements about $70,000. Transfers out of none. Total expenditures $950,000, a 5% increase over the previous year. When we get to the balance on this fund, if you go to page 2 now, I mean it this time, you can see we have an issue there where it doesn't appear that we have a balance. The reason for that shortage is because over the past couple years we received an LTAF 2 grant. LTAF is the Local Transportation Assistance Fund. That's the purple you see on the side, the revenue side is LTAF 1. That's lottery money that we receive broken out by population to each city. That's the lottery money we receive, and I believe the pot is about $24 million. They have a very complicated process where the first $24 million that comes in from a variety of games goes into this pot, is distributed to cities. Then once that hits that $24 million mark, it begins pouring over into other buckets. Well, at a certain point when everybody's bucket's filled, they come back to the cities again and they begin putting into the Local Transportation Assistance Fund, and they give it to us in the form of LTAF 2. So the last couple of years, we've received LTAF 2 grants from, I guess the lottery is where we get that from. And that is offsetting the need for additional operating revenue at this point. Normally, the transit fund would be getting an operating transfer from the general fund, but there's no need to do that this year. Are there any questions on that?
I do. Thank you. The transit then is like a dial-a-ride or?
That is correct. It's the dial-a-ride program, and it also includes Express Route 571 that goes down Grand Avenue down to downtown Phoenix. Those two items are contained in the transit fund. We'll move on to the HERF, Highway User Base budget of $6.1 million, recommended supplements about $250,000, total budget of just under $6.4 million, a 7% increase over the prior year. If we take a look at their graph, on the left side you see their expenditures. The red represents what's been recommended. On the right is the revenue. What you can barely see is a very small green sliver is an operating transfer coming from the general fund. I believe of about $35,000 coming in. Water operations. Their base budget is $6.8 million. Recommended supplements, $978,000. This supplement that's being recommended is for the transition of the water operations. That's why you see an increase of 15% over the prior fiscal year. The total expenditures is about $8.8 million. And if we take a look at here, you can see on the left side you have the expenditures, you have the recommended supplement for the transition, and then you have a transfer out at the top there. That transfer out is going to the Water Development Fee Fund for capital projects, and we'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow. But when you take a look at this, it appears that this fund is not in balance, and the major reason for that is because of the transition. There are additional operating costs that we're going to take on during the transition. Then after the transition is done, those costs will go away. At this point, that's correct. There's an overlap of service. Arizona American next year will continue operating our system while we're bringing on personnel so that July 1st of next fiscal year 10, we'll be able to take that over. The shortage that appears there will be made up with fund balance in the water operations fund. Replenishment operations, base budget of $1.2 million, recommended supplements of $36,000, transfers out $175,000. Again, the transfers out here are from the operations fund to the development fee capital fund, pays for some projects over there. Total expenditures, $1.4 million, a 4% increase over the prior year. And again, you can see the transfer located at the top of the left column there in green. Sewer operations fund, base budget of $8.2 million, recommended supplements $342,000, transfer out, again going to the sewer capital fund of $1.5 million, total expenditures of $10 million, percentage increase of about 6% over the prior fiscal year. You can see here that the revenues are outstripping the expenditures at this point, but one of the things that we have to collect in that revenue is for depreciation, so we can replace sewer lines, sewer equipment when it breaks down later on. At some point, we're going to have to start replacing equipment. Most of our stuff is relatively new because, we're a fast-growing city, but we have to start collecting some revenue now, saving that up, so at a later date when we need to start replacing equipment, we'll have that available. Sanitation operations, a base of $4.2 million, recommended supplements of $220,000, transfer out of $829,000. The transfer out from this fund, there is no capital fund for sanitation. This transfer includes the costs that are transferred to the vehicle replacement fund to replace the trucks. Total budget, $5.2 million, an increase of 11% over the prior fiscal year. And again, this fund the revenues are a little bit exceeding what the expenditures are, mostly so we can make sure we collect enough money to replace those trucks when needed. Are there any questions over the broad overview of the expenditures?
Yeah, I had one. Could we go back to transit operations?
Sure.
Could you explain that one more time?
Sure. I will try. Over the last couple of years, the city has received LTAF 2, which is additional unbudgeted revenue from the state, from the lottery. That has been in that fund account for the last 2 years, and we haven't been spending it. So the fund balance has grown in that fund. This year, we're going to be spending the fund balance down rather than putting a general fund subsidy into that fund.
Okay. So the revenue here, the revenue bar reflects.
That reflects the LTAF money we will receive next year, the new LTAF money. What it doesn't show is the fund balance that is already in that fund that'll pay for that deficit there.
Okay. Okay. So we're drawing on a fund balance.
That's correct.
This is replacing.
Any other questions?
I was just going to comment that just like we're going to be monitoring the revenue flow and the stream coming in, we will also be monitoring the budget. We'll be monitoring also expenditures so that you don't get into a situation where you're spending more than you receive. We're always watching that.
Mayor, at this point, I think that concludes our presentation, the first portion. I think we had a scheduled break after we completed these presentations. I don't know if that's your pleasure to allow public comment first and then go to break. That's your call, Mayor.
Yeah. Yes, if I'd prefer that we do go ahead and do the funds and then the questions and then go to break. And keeping that in mind, we can maybe move along on this.
We're done.
Take the question.
So, Mayor, we're done if you want to open it up to public comment
Do
or
you have somebody
questions.
from the public like to speak?
Yes, we have Mr. Ken Wright. Don't have very much.
It's like a year.
Oh, you don't want to know.
I don't want to know.
Thank you.
This was a general presentation this morning, and I appreciate the opportunity of being able to be here to speak. The way you guys have got this set up on an incremental schedule where we can address the general, and then as it gets down to the specific, we can address that. The comments made by the city manager in terms of the ground rules and format, I thought were just excellent. They were very comprehensive, and I was impressed by that we're going to have a kind of a soft outlook for the 5-year period to determine what may happen. In the latter portion of the comments, the city manager just got through making a comment that about the close monitoring of the actual expenditures versus the revenue that was coming in, and obviously we need that. Obviously they're on top of it, and that's great. No surprises are better than having the big shock waves hit. It looks like all the enterprise funds are being managed very well according to the vertical bar charts. And in terms of the service that's being provided by the managers of those funds, I think it's very impressive. The rate of expenditure increases that are noted and the actual services being provided, I think, correlate very well. And I spoke a few years ago when the city was contemplating contracting out their waste collection. And when you look at the enterprise fund about sanitation now, it does appear, in fact, that the costs are pretty well contained. I know several months ago the DPW director came and talked about more closely refining the waste collection routes to optimize that operation. And obviously the fruits of that will continue on an ongoing basis. It's not just a one-time cost savings, and I think that's a very impressive thing. In terms of the staff budget overview comments, once again, they were very well presented graphically and with supporting statistics. And it's good to have someone like Michael Schrock and his staff make these presentations. The City of Surprise is fortunate to have this young man on a duty station in the capacity that he's in. Not only today, but throughout the last year, 2 years, whatever, I think we've had good financial control at the staff level. And I think that's will be continuing, hopefully. I think there's been a very positive presentation so far. Due to the things that have been expressed today about somewhat limited revenue, I would hope that some of the initiatives that were discussed in latter February at the 2-day retreat are not necessarily being put on severe hold, but I would hope in the out years that that you guys, as a basically new council, are able to focus on some of the higher priority things that were mentioned by yourselves and by staff at the February conference. And I know it's been almost impossible as the process has developed to make something that you discussed in the latter part of February come to fruition immediately. So I would hope that that you be able to look at that. In the final analysis, when we look at budget development and control, in my view, it's a matter of confidence. The staff develops something, you guys look at it, you provide your analysis, provide your input. It's not an easy process for the staff or for the council. Obviously, different people have different things they'd like to see occur. And I think that the presentation this morning has set the stage for the subsequent review of the specific budget request. And in terms of confidence, I, as one little taxpayer out there, I certainly have confidence in the staff that works on this. I have confidence in the department heads, and I have confidence in the council's collective wisdom to come up with a budget that is a little bit on the conservative side. I heard the comments about the 2-month contingency fund, and sure, there's questions about whether that's adequate or not, but I think it is, and I think that we need to look at it on that basis. And I have absolute confidence, like I said, in the collective wisdom of the council. We have some people that have varying degrees of what you might call financial knowledge accumulated over the years, but we also have some people on council that, in my review, have asked incisive questions about different things that come before the council. I'm sure that will occur, and I thank you.
Thank you very much. And just a housekeeping point here. We're going to use a timer that you hear going off and allow each speaker to have 3 minutes. And once that timer goes off, we'd appreciate it if you'd close your comments. It's just a matter of practicality today. We've got a long ways to go, and so that would be appreciated. Thank you very much. City Clerk? Sherry?
Martha Bales. Martha Bales.
I'll turn it on. I'll keep it on. I'll keep it on.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. I'm going to make mine very summarized, my comments. The water situation, I don't know, is that just taking over certain water operations that Arizona American was performing, or did that have anything to do with the city start doing the billing process? And as you talk about enterprise funds, always remember the ratepayers pay. You always have to keep that in mind. Otherwise, the subsidies from the general fund will start eating you alive, number one. Number two is the $635,000 for the 10% set aside. That's kind of high for me, real high. It wasn't mentioned in the presentation. It's in the book back here. And the general fund subsidies, I think a little more time needs to be spent on that, because every year it goes up, and a lot of it is with the swimming pools, and I think some ratepayers need to start paying a little bit more of that. We can't afford year after year, particularly if you're going to start adding swimming pools, to subsidize swimming pools. 3 years ago, it was $700,000. So I don't know what it is today, but those are some of the things that I think that the council needs to look at. And I know tomorrow is the Capitol, but I'm going to mention a couple things that in advance so somebody can start thinking about it. Last year, there was $400,000 in the budget for the fence along Santa Fe. $400,000 is a lot of money to put up a fence. And if BNSF hasn't given their authorization yet to put it up, then I think that money should be coming out and be looked at and used for something else that will service the city of Surprise. The other thing is the paving of 219th Avenue and getting with Saguaro View to do some of their streets. So those are two major items that will help, capital. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sherry?
Yes. Next will be Mike Woodard.
Good morning, council and staff. I'd like to thank Mike and the budget group for what they've done. I think with what they've had to work with, they've done an excellent job. I do have a couple of questions, though. One of them was on the revenue side, property tax. If I'm looking at this correctly, it's indicating that you're projecting an increase in property tax. And I'm wondering, I know in my particular case, my assessed value went down considerably, which doesn't make me happy except for taxes purposes. So where is the increase in the property tax coming from? I realize we're building more homes, but we're also losing some value in existing homes. So maybe if you could, because I just don't understand that part of it. And the other, I saw a 10% set aside. That's city policy that's required. that might be an area that could be looked at again. 10% every year as the budget increases, you know, what happens when we reach, let's say, $1 billion budget, and, you know, we're creeping up there. That's an awful lot of money for revitalization. In other words, you know, that's taxpayers supporting other taxpayers. So just some questions there. Maybe that rate, that 10% rate, could be reduced by the council through policy. I'm not sure. Just some questions.
Thank you very much. Sherry, is there anybody else wishing to speak?
That is all at this time.
Okay, then I'm going to call for a 15-minute break. I'd like everybody to be in place by 5 minutes after 10. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The housekeeping item again, when speakers around the table, if you would be so kind as to speak directly into the mic like Jarrett was doing, we could hear him throughout the room, and it was very, very helpful. We're a little bit challenged on this, but I understand that the TV audience is hearing us just fine. We want to make sure that the folks that have taken the time out of their day to come down and be with us, that they hear everything that's being said. And as a second note, if you're making a comment at the table, if you'll make that comment loud enough so everybody can hear it. That way, if we ask off mic, ask staff a question, it would be more appropriate to have everybody hear what's being asked, so that it's completely clear. So, having said that, we turn the meeting back over to you, Michael.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. The next section that we have today are the department presentations on what has been recommended with the fiscal year 2009 budget. And what we will do is management budget will review the first few slides of the departments, talk about their divisions, just briefly, their responsibilities based on the input that the departments gave us. Again, show the total amount of items that have been recommended for fiscal year 2009. And then we'll turn that over to the departments, who will give you an overview of the items, how it's going to help them accomplish what they need to do this next fiscal year. And then they'll finish that up with a brief presentation on the goals and objectives and how what they do ties into the goals and objectives of this council, as we heard during the retreat a couple months ago. So that's the plan for this section. I will start us off with mayor and council. Again, you simply only have the general operations as your division. And the responsibilities, again, obviously setting the policy for the city. You want to make sure that the citizens have high level of services and that you're communicating with them as well. And again, you represent the city on national, state, and local levels. For this year, FY 2008, you nearly had a $400,000 budget. What is being recommended is $717,000, $717,800. I am not over that highway user revenue fund item yet. That's an 80% increase, and that would include one full-time equivalent position. Again, the items as shown here are the recommended district funds at $70,000 and the chief of staff at $135,200. That, again, would include all of salaries, benefits, supplies of that nature. I'll turn it over to the city manager, who will give an update on the rest of this item.
May I make a comment or ask a question?
Certainly.
The 80% increase for, can you go back one slide? The 80% is for the overall operations, most of which in previous years has been at the city clerk's domicile, correct?
There was a position that was in the clerk's office that would be an admin assistant. That's correct.
No, not an assistant, but supplies.
Oh, there were some. Yes, correct.
The whole budget for the city council, wasn't that shuffled over to the city clerk's office? So that 80% is a little overstated.
That's correct. There were some items that were being charged in other locations that would now be coming back to the mayor and council's budget. That's correct.
Okay. So do you know how much of that, other than the FTE, how much of that is being shoveled over back to the mayor and council budget lines?
We'll have to get the exact number for you. I don't have that right with me at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor and Council, just in response to your question, I don't have the exact number either, but I believe that the majority of that was at one time reflected in a mayor-council budget that went away, and now in order to accurately account for what happens within that activity, we felt that it was important to have that mayor-council budget reflected as such. The two new recommendations are one for district funds. And basically what it says is to allocate funds to the mayor and council for day-to-day business. And basically it could entail a lot of things. And the way that we've set it aside is $5,000 for each council member, $10,000 for the mayor, and then a $30,000 kind of miscellaneous. And basically what it would do is to help for it could be a myriad of things, but it could be small capital expenditures within the districts where there's an ability to do something to create an opportunity to accommodate a neighborhood or whatever, whether it's fixing a pothole or maybe taking care of a curb cut. I mean, it could be just a number of things that can be done within that type of a budget. Other things could be memberships, to maybe a community organization, help with a potential either fundraising activity, something like that, an event, so a sponsorship, any of those things that could happen. The $30,000, as I mentioned, would be more for the council as a whole, and again to be able to do worthwhile projects within your districts or within the city as a whole. And obviously there would be an opportunity for the council to talk about at a later date how they want to do that. If they want to set up a policy for how you use your district funds, that would be totally in the preview of the mayor and council. So that's what the district funds. And again, I believe that used to be also in the former budgets, and it's not unusual in other cities. I mean, that is something that's needed in order for mayor and council to conduct their day-to-day business. And what's happening now is that it does happen. It just gets charged to other places. I mean, whether it's a city manager's fund or the city clerk's fund or somewhere else, it does happen. There are opportunities for doing that, but it really should be reflected where it's happening in terms of, letting the public know what you're doing. The other request is for the chief of staff, and this again would be to provide direct professional management assistance to the mayor and council. And I will tell you that, again, a city of our size, if you look at some of the other cities that surround us, this is just a position that is a very natural type of position. I think we've evolved. You're now a community of over 1,000 population. There are a lot of things that happen at the state level, at the regional level, in terms of representation with MAG, in terms of even opportunities to speak with the governor's office, which recently happened. And frankly, our chief of staff was very successful in coordinating a meeting and making sure that we got a seat at the table. And we talked about, when the governor is talking about a $42 billion package, we want to be able to have Surprise there and represent it. And it's about that. It's about making sure that you're at the table and that you have those revenue generation opportunities that, when these things are happening, the only folks that can represent Surprise are Surprise. You're not going to have any other city raise their hand and say, well, what about Surprise? What are they getting? You got to be at the table. And part of what happens is that it happens very, very quickly. A lot of times what's happening on the political level won't get communicated except through staff. And while information is changing, unless you have staff that's talking to other staff in other cities, a lot of times you go to present a proposal, that has totally changed because the players have changed their minds or priorities. So again, very important, not only for that type of situation, but whether there are other opportunities with Luke Air Force Base. I mean, they are a partner. I know that there's a huge interest on the council's part to make sure that we continue to preserve Luke and Luke Ox 1. And there are some connections there that also, if you have somebody that's working directly for the council, those networks really, really help. And again, sometimes it's very interesting how the dynamics work. Sometimes there are administrative staff that may work for a city manager that will not share information that maybe chief of staff to the mayor and council would have. They will share it in, counterpart to counterpart. So that's very important. So again, the representation being there when it happens and acting quickly. The other thing is that things are much more complicated than they ever were before. Information is changing, whether it relates to transportation, air quality, economic development. All those things are changing at a very rapid rate. And water quality issues are huge, and things change all the time. And in order to protect our interests, it's very important to have somebody there that's representing the council, that's bringing information back to the council and making sure that they know what's going on and making sure that there are opportunities. Just very quickly, I mentioned mentioned that there are a lot of the cities. I mean, it's just a position that is now a very commonplace position. Cities larger than ourselves, I can't even tell you how many, and obviously a lot bigger city, but how many positions are represented in the mayor council budgets in Phoenix, and I believe they're like 60 positions, and that could be a little overstated or understated, but it's a large number. But other communities such as Gilbert, Peoria, Tempe, Avondale, Goodyear, Chandler, Scottsdale, all have chief of staff, some of them chief of staff, some of them call them council assistants, but they all realize the value in having that staff. I will tell you personally, and I do support it as, somebody that works out of the city manager's office and then having to work very directly with a mayor and council. I've worked in communities that have had assistants, and I've worked in communities that haven't, and the difference is noticeable. I mean, you have a lot more professional approach. You have a more polished approach. You're going to be there with the information, not the information of yesterday or the week before, because you're talking to your counterparts, and these issues change very quickly. So that is those represent the two requests that are coming out of the mayor and council, and basically again, I believe that the way that we're structured, even though the chief of staff would work directly for the mayor and council, it is still a report to the city manager's office, and that's why it's appropriate for me to present this. So with that, if you have any questions.
Just on the district funds, 5,000 per council member. Is that, you're saying that's for, and this is open to anybody that wants to answer, for capital improvements within our district?
Well, I would say like small kind of capital improvements. Like sometimes we've had an opportunity where somebody's maybe complaining because maybe there's a piece of sidewalk missing or something like that. I mean, if no, that would never happen. But if there was an opportunity to do something like that, maybe it's not on our scheduled plan, but it might be a trip hazard and it should be addressed.
Certainly.
That would be one option. Another option would be whether there was a potential sponsorship that you wanted to be a part of, whether it's with a school or with a chamber or something like that. That would give you an opportunity to do that as well. A membership, something that's maybe over and above what we normally have in terms of memberships, but again would help the networking, between the city and the community. The city and Luke, whatever, something like that. So, and again, like I said, it might be something that the mayor and the council want to look at and come up with a guideline in terms of how you would use that.
Okay. And that discussion, I guess, could take place later on. My concern is the size of our districts comparatively. I have a much larger ground to cover. There's other districts that are much larger than others within our city. And just to be fair and equitable on what residents, what constituents are getting that funding. I think that needs to be discussed rather than say 5,000 per district.
Right, and that's a good point. And that's there's the other 30,000 in there that could be something that would be used and utilized.
John,
Question.
last year we spent some of that money in supporting special programs for things like police and fire projects that they were working on. I, for example, supported that with some money before that was changed. It could also be for like a neighborhood block party or something of that kind to get the group of some neighborhoods together. Right. And I'm going to start counting my cactuses if you're going to go by size of districts.
No, and I like the
Had
way
to say
it's,
something funny. I'm sorry.
I like the way it's set up to where we need to present where we're using that funding. If we're using it for expenses because of daily business that we're conducting, I think that amount can be lowered significantly and rolled into that additional 30,000. Where if you want to do something for a block party or put more cactus in, then
No,
you
I'm
need to
counting the
present that to
cactus so
us.
I
and we
get
can
more
have a
money.
discussion.
This question probably goes to you, Michael. What were the amounts? Let's see. Currently, it's suggested or recommended 5,000 and 10,000 for the mayor. What previously were the amounts for council and mayor?
It was $17,000 for the mayor, I believe.
No, 17,000 for each council member.
Oh, 17,000 per district.
Sorry.
17,000 per district.
And how much for the mayor?
48,000.
40 what?
48?
48,000? Thank you.
This has been a project that I've been looking forward to come back to the table since taking office. I thought it was incorrect that the previous council threw out the entire discretionary fund usage in their later days of their terms. In doing city business for the last 3 months, I found it very difficult to conduct the business, meaning that there are times where we have to pay for something. We can't always be, say, taken to lunch by other municipalities and I'm sorry, but I'll just have a cup of coffee because that's all I had the money for. Not that I can't buy a lunch. However, it'd be out of my pocket as it currently stands. And I think that we need to have some kind of a budget for those incidentals that we have to out of pocket just to conduct the business. Mm-hmm. And I think, as well as you, John, is that I don't know if 5,000. I think 5,000 might be too much for some of us. Okay, but at least to have some capability in a very small, much smaller degree, but also the 70,000 as a total, the majority of it should be held in a general fund that can be used at the council decision. Okay, not necessarily indiscriminately. I'm all for discretionary funds usage, but not how it was used in the past. I don't think donations should even be a part of it. I think that it's just a matter of conducting business within our districts as well as doing business for the city of Surprise.
No, and I agree. I guess my question came about just based on the presentation. It sounded like capital improvements.
No.
5,000 across the board. Yeah.
And I fully support Mr. Alton's position. I, too, have found that I have, at times, not been able to conduct city business because of the way it was structured within the context of a golf tournament or some special event that was outside of my personal ability to pay. And so to have some discretionary funds, I think is reasonable. Keep in mind that when we say 5,000, 10,000, those are limits. Those aren't spending mandates. So each counselor will be accountable for what they spend, and their district people are going to be looking at that. And so I fully expect that it's going to be a very open book for all of us. I think that this is a different council. We understand much better. We've heard the people speak about their concerns about expenditures, and we're going to be accountable. And I believe that's exactly what Mr. Alton's bringing forward, so I support it fully.
Yeah, if I could jump in here, I think the age of the district is more important than the size of the district. Anyway, no, but I think capital improvements could be one aspect of the discretionary funds. But I think whatever we do, I think there ought to be written guidelines in writing, and we ought to decide what the parameters are for how we're going to use the money, because it is our residents' money, so we ought to tell them how we think we're going to spend it. So that's my comment.
Through the chair.
Mayor, just I'm sorry, Joe. Just
Go ahead.
clarification. When I said capital expense, I meant small, tiny little ones. So never deviating from the capital improvement program.
Well, coming from the only one probably that was from the last council, I find it ironic that this comes up again. We heard the buzzword accountability, and we continually went back to the list, re-looked at it, and finally I just said, and I'm the one that made the motion, to throw it into council contingencies, and then if you want to do something in your district, you come before the council, and that it's brought out in public. So, I mean, I didn't want to do that, but it was necessary at the time. It's just it's a slippery slope, because no matter what happens, it's a subjective thing. I mean, no matter how detailed you want to get, someone's going to question those details and what they are interpreted to mean. So, I'm one way or the other. I mean, it doesn't matter. If I want something, I'll come before council. If you feel like we need definitive things, I'm just telling you, it's always going to be questioned, no matter what somebody does. And a former council member decided to put $10,000 toward animal shelters twice, and she paid the consequence for it. So I guess what I'm saying is it's all going to be subjective. I believe we should be able to do this, but I just forewarn you, no matter how detailed we get, there's going to be some sort of interpretation, and you're going to come under heat for it. So be prepared. Accountability, I heard a lot that people ran in the last election, and I didn't think it was ability of accountability or an issue of accountability. I thought it was just interpretation, and sometime we're going to come under heat no matter what we do.
Yeah.
I agree with it, though. We need to do it responsibly, and I think then it doesn't provide an issue. But the public is always going to be what is responsible. Yeah. So
Well, I understand that, Joe, except that if we say as one of the guidelines, it has to be spent within the city limits of Surprise. How about that for a guideline?
That's a good guideline. I think that this discussion should take place. It should take place in the future, and we should go forward now. Just as a follow-up to Mr. Johnson, we're elected by the people of Surprise, people in your districts, people at large, and they elect us to make decisions. And so we need to make those decisions, and like Mr. Johnson said, if they don't agree with them, they will speak out. Mm-hmm. So I think to have a blend of guidelines and then understand that we're elected to make decisions, and that those decisions are going to be scrutinized, then that seems to be the right blend. So we can work on that and come back at a future date.
I guess in closing, Mayor, if I could, it's a. I don't want to say this, and there's no offense to anybody, but the public can look at this as hypocritical. You ran that we threw it all back into where it comes in front of council, and everything is scrutinized in the open, and it's transparent, and it's in the open, and now all of a sudden, new council gets in, and they elect to go with the discretionary funds right away. It can look unfavorable. So that's all I'm saying. I don't say I disagree with them, but I'm just saying you got to be careful what looks hypocritical and not, because sitting in these seats, everything's going to be that way. So,
no, you're right, Joe.
There you go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mayor, Council, at the retreat, February 23rd and 24th, you came up with some goals and priorities, and we had promised to come back during this retreat to talk about those. So we're going to have Doug kind of walk you through those.
Excuse me. It seems as though there was two things in that last slide that we're really slipping fast over. Yeah. I would like to talk about the chief of staff.
Please do.
It's absolutely amazing that at one time this position was assistant to the mayor and council, and now all of a sudden it's the chief of staff. I never heard of the transition. It never came to us. And I think that we should, as a council and mayor, have an opportunity to talk about the title of that position, number one. I think we need to talk about the functionality of the position, because this is budget time. This is the time that we're looking to allocate money towards the the position going forward. But most importantly, the functionality of the job. This is somewhat of a big concern to the constituency, and I think it needs to be addressed and open to discussion. With all due respect to our Ms. Gutierrez, I think that we need to Gutierrez, excuse me. I think we need to talk about it going forward, and whether or not this is a position that we would like to see, and the line item on the budget is the dollar amount that goes along with the position.
And no disrespect taken, when I campaigned and was elected by a great majority of the people, their expectation was that I'd bring polish and professionalism and stability to this council. And that is, in fact, what I've done. I didn't wait for a long time to begin that job. We started right at the beginning, finding a person that can connect us to people anywhere in the state and, in fact, at the federal level. We have, as city manager said, we need to have those connections so that we can even be at the table. And trust me, we are being noticed for that particular position. And it's a position of a big city. Small towns probably wouldn't need such a position, but a big city that's going to go forward with polish and professionalism, it's a definite need. And I feel, having spoken with so many leaders outside of our city, even more strongly about the move. I've been told it's sophisticated. I'm told that it's incredible that we got this particular person. I've been told that this person, who not only brings her experience, but she brings generations of experience to the position, is just brilliant, frankly. You know, when we go to Washington and we want to get a audience with Congressman Franks, we pay a consultant $500 an hour. When we're here in Surprise, if we want to get a sit down with Congressman Franks, we have this position who knows Congressman Franks personally, and it's a done deal. When we want to meet with Sheriff Joe Arpaio, it gets done, not only just with him, but his two top aides, and not for 30 minutes, but for an hour and 30 minutes. That translates into ultimately that'll translate into economic benefit for our city. So I fully support this position. I ask gentlemen, for you to do the same. I do need to make an apology. When the position was first brought forward, there was some explanation of what the position meant. Some other folks on a previous council and on blogs made it out to be something totally different. Talked about it being more of a secretarial type position, and it certainly isn't. This is a high policy, high performance type position, and trust me, it's going to do us well. Thank you.
If I could, and I don't mean any disrespect, Lynn, because I know you thought about this, and you came into the city with a brand new council for the most part, except for Joe, and a city manager resigns, so you have an interim city manager. I mean, you had a big load, buddy. So you have to understand where I'm critiquing this, is that the articulation of this job has not got out to the residents. I'm just telling you that from what I'm hearing from a lot of people. They want to know what this buys the city. And I think we haven't done a very good job of articulating it. What the job description is, what she exactly is doing, and what it does for our city.
Well, that's an excellent point. And as way of explanation, the person that was making the public comments was the person that was facing you, that you were facing in the recall. And I felt that it was inappropriate for me to enter into that political situation. So I took the hits during the recall process so that I wasn't influencing either for one person or against the other. I wanted you guys to run on your own merits, and I believe that's what's taken place. So that's the reason that I didn't come out and outline that position, and I'd certainly be more than happy to do it in any manner you wish. If you'd like me to write an article or just in a public forum at a council meeting to explain this, I'll be more than happy to do that. And I recognize that some of you have had people question, what the position is and what it does and whether it's a worthwhile position. Well, part of the response to those people is what's taking place today, what the city manager has said and why she's brought the position forward and why Mayor believes that this position needs to be there.
But see, part of our package, I think, when we're adding a person at the executive, you want to call this the executive level, I think part of our package should have been a job description and what it does for the city, what this person's doing. Because I'm still not clear, Lynn. I mean, I think I kind of know what she does, but I'm not sure, and I'm on the council.
Let me before city manager steps in. You've heard that we're working on a customer resolution system. She's spearheading that. You know that we're creating a roadmap for each councilor's success so that they can best serve their constituents. She's doing that to help you reach your goals. She works behind the scenes with the Intergovernmental Relations Department. She's been conducting outreach and building regional relationships with the school districts, with Arizona State University, with chambers of commerce, with business people. She assisted with coordinating what began as a BNSF meeting with other communities, and now is a Grand Avenue coalition. She's been having discussions with developers, Luke Air Force Base, Western Trails as a tourism piece. We are considering, twice we've talked about it in public, about going for the All-American City Award, and she's spearheading that. Let's see, I've got a little list here. She's been coordinating council roles and participation in groundbreakings and ribbon cuttings to make sure that if something's happening in your district, you know about it, and you're there and you're prepared with whatever you need in terms of statements or background history. Transportation, this particular person was part of the Prop 400. She helped write it. She worked with all of the people in the state from a City of Glendale perspective to bring that about. Luke Air Force Base. She's a honorary flight commander, I think it's called, with Luke, has a long history and understanding of the issues related to Luke Air Force Base and Auxiliary Field 1 here in Surprise. So there's just a wealth of knowledge that comes with this particular hire, and that's why she's so valuable to the city.
Mayor, members of council, I want to say something about what Skip just said, and it's more fundamental, even more than my constituents not knowing what this position does. And you have elaborated on that. It's how the position came about in the first place. It came about in a special meeting. It came about as a contract job. It came about without any competition. And this is a public employer we're talking about, the City of Surprise. And for 33 years, I worked in the public employment, and every job had to be filled competitively, not have a name attached to the job before the job was even created. And I think that may have been one of the things that I know has irritated an awful lot of my constituency, that irregardless of who you hired, shouldn't you have gone through some process to hire that individual rather than have the individual already chosen the contract presented to the council and then say, sign it, and we'll hire this person. Now I hear that we're going to create a chief of staff position, and it sounds like we're not going to have competition again. You speak of the woman, and I have no disrespect to you, Miriam. Please don't misunderstand. But are we just going to continue her in a civil service position now without any competition? And I'm not saying she's not qualified, but there may be 10 other people out there in the state of Arizona that have all the same connections she has, have all the same knowledge as she has, have all the possibilities she has if we decide to keep the position in the first place. So those are my concerns, and a lot of my constituents have made it very clear to me that they have difficulty with this position. The second part of it is that we have staff that do many of these things. We have a director of intergovernmental services and her staff who do many of the things you suggest about working with other governmental agencies throughout the state, including the governor's office, Luke Air Force Base, et cetera. We do have staff on board right now that take care of our setting up of ribbon cuttings and things of that sort and ceremonial issues. So it isn't required to have this job to get those things done. So that's my concerns.
Through Chair. I guess I want to make a comment. I agree with what you've said, and I guess I'll talk to some of the things that she's done for me that I think are most important, and that is she's been very proactive in getting me meetings with people where I really haven't had time to really think in that direction, but she's here, hey, we've got this, and this. I can arrange this meeting. I can get these people. Do you want to meet? And I've got a list of stuff in front of me, and I'm like, whoa, okay, well, I didn't think, okay, and I can pick from those. So in that instance, she's been very, very important to me, and I want to thank you. And she's gone out, and that's what she does. She goes out and she gets those connections and those issues that are going to be coming up before the city, and she gets me those meetings if I want them. So that's another responsibility on top of what he said that I think has brought me the most importance. Another thing I want to mention, when I first got in office, yes, believe it or not, I was a rookie at one time, and we had Michael Chirac as our sort of Miriam's responsibility. That's what he did for us. So it's not like the position to me is new. I mean, it's just that it's just the process that happened, I think. But the position's always been one of I could go to Michael until he moved up the ladder. But that's one issue. So I can say and I can attest to. I think the job description is in here. Some of the things that the mayor has is in the supplemental. So the sort of semi job description is there. But I wanted to add that she's very proactive and has been for me in getting me meetings with people that I think I need to talk to on issues that may come before the council. The next thing is I agree with you, John, that the hiring process, I had 3 questions here. Salary, ? Hiring process, ? And then position, and I put yes. I feel I agree with you. I think it's needed. But there's some things, Mayor, that I think, and City Manager, the hiring process, like John said, and like you said, and the salary. I mean, those are my 2 big question marks. Whether we need it or not, I think it's a positive thing for the city. But the salary and how we go about hiring the position are my 2 big issues. So I guess first we need to determine is, yes, do we want this position? And then obviously the other 2, like I said, what are the processes going to be and how much are we willing to pay? So that's fine.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to echo some of Joe's opinion here. I've served on the council a few years, and I come back. Let's see. Let me go back a little. When I left the council 4 years ago, there were something like 40,000 people. I come back 4 years later, and there's 104,000. So I mean, that's just tremendous growth. And the position that we're looking at, I think it's needed in our city. As the mayor mentioned when he ran on this campaign, he wanted to bring professionalism to the city of Surprise, and this is one of the tools that he needs to do this. And I think my recommendation is to keep the position. As some of the comments were made here that the process maybe was a little skewed, but I think we can take care of that.
Yeah, and I'm going to just send out this disclaimer, too. This is no reflection on Miriam. I think she's done a fabulous job. And I would agree, Councilman Johnson, I think that there just needs to be a little more clarification. When we look at this budget and we look at the next 2 years of it's going to kind of level off, and we're looking at taking hits possibly next 2 years. And then you look at $135,000 salary, and us not providing increases to the current employees, got a problem with that a little bit. I think the word is procurement code. I don't know. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. So this has to go out. It would have to go out to a formal hiring process, unless there's something that says that we can appoint, which I don't think there is. So I think there just needs to be a better process. I agree with Councilman Longabaugh and Councilman Johnson. They've read my mind in a way. There's value to this position, but we got to do it the right way.
I don't necessarily disagree with that. Posting it and going out. I happen to be a pretty smart mayor, and I identify people who are very talented and who are going to forward our position as a city, and that's the person. It's going to be highly unfair to anybody that comes in to try to compete for that job because of the connections and the things that she's already done. But we definitely can post it and go through that process. I don't have a problem with that. Just as a reminder, folks, we in open meeting now special meet there. Let's get rid of these negative connotations about special meetings. When we have a workshop, that's a special meeting. Now, it's not a secret meeting, it's a public meeting. And so to say that something happened in a special meeting is inappropriate, and it minimizes and diminishes the work that we do here. So let's get that straight. Second thing is the vote was a 6-1 vote with 4-0 dissenting. You gentlemen, with the exception of Mr. Hall, were there and were part of that 6. And you seem to understand the position at that time. And it was fully appropriate to enter into a contract because the city manager has the ability to contract with whomever they believe. This is with a cap of $50,000. They can contract with whomever they believe is going to help bring services and benefits to the city. The salary was determined by the previous city manager. I had nothing to do with that. He negotiated it based on doing a survey of other communities. So that wasn't an issue. That was then, you agreed. So what's taken place in the meantime, I think, is 2 things. One is I didn't do a good job of explaining to the public, and you guys have taken a little bit of heat for that. Hopefully this is going to be part of that clarification process. The second thing is it's appropriate. We're in a budget. This is budget time. It's appropriate when we create a position to discuss the position and to have an open application and recruitment and the process just as we would any other employee. Don't disagree with that at all. So,
thank you, Mayor, for that clarification of special meeting. I
welcome.
Do not use the Miriam. Well, I mean, I don't have a need. I had taken on a BNSF project and had opened up those lines of communication just on behalf of my constituency, and continuously we're being invited invited out to groundbreakings and special ceremonies and so forth. What I see is that it comes into City Hall, but we don't necessarily get preview to all of them. We don't know what's going on in the city as a city. We know what's going to go on in our district. But what I'm saying is I believe there's a filtering process that takes place when these event notifications come in as to whom she believes and or the mayor believes ought to attend. And I think that we are on all equal footing here. We are all part of the council, and we should all know what's happening and what the invitations are when they come into the city, number one. Number two, I have the capability of using the existing assistant to the council and mayor, and that position's been around for a while, and I believe is underutilized at the present time. But I believe that functionality of that job answers a lot of our needs as they now stand. I have gone out on occasion with Miriam to different civic events. She has got a wonderful reputation. I can see how the mayor and the city of Surprise need her contact capability. Not saying that we can't reinvent the wheel and establish our own contacts with a lower paid person, okay? But I do have a problem with the pay as well. yes, we're not giving any increases other than the cost of living increase to all employees, and this is a major, major salaried position. I believe that the position should be called something else than chief of staff, possibly an assistant to the mayor, because I believe she sits right across the hall from him. Who's going to use her the most? The mayor is, and rightfully so. She has got the contact, the information for all over the state, and as well as the United States federal government legislature. She has established that. Everybody thinks very highly outside of the city. I think it's very important that he continues with that relationship with her, however, not at the salary that is at, nor as the designation of title. And I think that we continue to use and step up the level of importance of our intergov current staff, as well as our assistant to the mayor and council. I think we can utilize them a lot more and their existing positions.
Just a point of clarification is, well, I want to make it very, very clear, there is no filtering process that takes place. When I meet with pretty much everybody, my door is open. If any of you walk by, I invite you in. I give you a brief update as to what we're talking about. It happens that I spend 40 or 50 hours a week working on behalf of the City of Surprise. We're a big city. That's just what it takes right now. I'm not trying to make more of a job of it than it is, but it has big requirements, and I need that kind of help. So, I do have a question. I'm not familiar with how the salary was determined, and I was wondering if somebody could help all of us understand what that represents.
Mayor, members of the council, the salary as you see it includes what that item is. It shows the total cost for that position. The range that we've used for the position itself is the assistant to the city manager pay range, and that is $61,000 to approximately $102,000 at the maximum. So that's the range. The pay range is, the pay itself is not $135,000 that you see on that document. So that is the range. Now, as far as the process for it being determined, the HR department is reviewing comparable information for the cities as if we were going to do it for any other employee that would be added to the city. That information is being analyzed right now by the HR department. So we thought we were comfortable with this range. Okay, I'm being told the city manager may have that information already, but do you want to go ahead, Priscilla?
Pick up.
I think you pretty much provided, I don't think I brought that with me, Jim, but you pretty much provided it is an assistant to the city manager range, so that is the range at this point. And we have been looking at whether that's appropriate, so we're not done with that analysis because that's something that we would look at and continue to look at. And I'm pretty sure when it was done before through either the city manager's office that they took into account all the duties and responsibilities and then also what our market would bear. And it fell right within that market, and the duties and responsibilities did bear out to that assistant to the city manager position.
So what you would see there is we've budgeted at the midpoint for that range, and that's what's included in your documents today. So it's not, again, don't get hung up on the 135 as pay. That's the total cost for the employee with benefits and all those other items.
Includes everything.
Yes, sir.
Can you, how much percentage-wise? Give us an idea of what kind, benefits.
Roughly,
and all
it's
that.
30% for benefits, and then the rest would be salary.
30%.
And that's exactly what all other employees would garner in terms of benefits.
So we could look at any employee's pay and then add 30% more, and that would cause it to be representative of what we're seeing here today.
That's correct, Mayor.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, Mayor and Council, maybe in the future that's something that could be broken out because it is misleading. I mean, we could in the future break it out to show the benefits as well.
Right. Because that makes it look like the salary is that, not the total expense. So,
just for your information, all the employees that have been added and are represented in your budget books, we've done it the same way. It's consistently done that way. We certainly can break it out in the future if that's the desire of council.
Thank you. Thank you.
So is the intent, because I just want to get some clarification on this. So the intent of, that I see the real value of Miriam being is to interact and develop the connections at the regional level, state level, that benefit Surprise in terms of transportation dollars or whatever other dollars are out there. And how would she interact with our intergov department? How would they create synergy?
Okay, I think that's one of the intents, because it's a lot more than that, because as you're getting involved into issues, obviously it takes a lot of analysis, it takes a lot of research, it takes a lot of going back and forth in terms of issues with different cities and towns. Now, the intergov is another area that, does get involved, but mostly at the legislative process, during the legislative process, and for the most part, during that legislative session, I don't really see Michelle because that's where she's at, and she's got to be there, whether it's 6 o'clock in the morning, 7 or 8 at 9, whenever the legislative session is, they're active. She's there, and so is her staff. So there's not that opportunity, Skip, during that time for her to be taking care of other things that are flowing out of maybe either the cities and towns.
How do we envision Miriam interacting with that?
And there's
That's my question.
And I will tell you, there's probably a lot of discussion, and I would venture to guess that a lot of it happens through emails and things like that because of Michelle's doing something else. Miriam might be trying to take care of it at a city level. So they would be interacting, on a consistent basis, but a lot of it would be through emails.
In clarification, I just want to make sure that they're not crossing
Right.
each other.
And that's why I'm trying to give, to really show where that time is allocated in terms of Michelle's time, because it is a lot of that time. I would say 95% of her time during the session is at the legislature. And they consistently are giving us updates in terms of what's going on with the legislature. So if there's a transportation bill or something that's happening, that information would come back to Miriam, a host of other people, and then Miriam could start working on that, making sure that our interests are protected within that legislation, whether it's to promote it or to kill it. So, very different functions. It might seem like it's parallel, but it really, they're very different, and they can work together, but they have their very distinct functions.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happened so far. Is if Miriam has history on something Michelle's working on, then they'll sit in my office and discuss, that history. If Michelle needs to get information out to mayor and council, then she communicates that with Miriam. Michelle also has Michael Salaya, but he's got his own specific duties with Luke Air Force Base and one other area that he covers. And so they're a very busy department. And right from the beginning, when we had our staff council retreat, we talked about teamwork. And we talked about empowering each of our employees. And that's exactly what's happening is we don't want to create a situation here where employees are at odds with one another or feel threatened by one another. We're a team going forward. We each have our individual roles. And if we play them, we can take Surprise to great levels. That's the intent.
I'm still having problems with us talking about a person, not a position.
Well,
we're identifying the person so much with this position, and yet what we're considering is a position in the city's budget of 135.2. We need to get away from the person. We need to look at, is this position appropriate? And what Councilman Alton said earlier, I think, is appropriate. Maybe the salary is a little off. Joe did it too, or whatever. But we need to be considering the position, not the individual.
Coming from an HR person, I think that's probably good advice. And I assume that one HR person, probably speaking with our HR director, would suggest that they will do their job in determining the appropriate salary for this position. So thank you for this discussion, folks. It's been a good one, I think.
One last comment, and that is the title of the position. I think that it might be misleading since this position has, it's my understanding, no staff. So I don't understand this chief of staff when there is absolutely no staff that would come under this function of this job function.
If this, as now John's making me very sensitive to this, if this position was created, there would definitely be at this point a staff member in Kim Davies. So, and that's not unusual because generally what's going to happen in in a position like this, especially as a new city that's growing, you don't start off out with a staff of 7. You may start out with a chief of staff and then maybe some support, because Kim's would definitely be more of an administrative support function to that position. So.
Well, the only reason I bring that up is that I do see that the mayor utilizes this function, this job, quite heavily, and so what I'm thinking is that this function should then be accountable and work in association with the mayor, and that's all well and good, and should be called possibly an assistant to the mayor.
Can I interrupt? She comes with me too, so she does a lot with me. I'd rather it be mayor and council.
So would I, because she is serving some of the needs of the council, and she's made herself as available as you want to utilize her. That's what she's done. And there's been times when, if we have to talk later in the day or the next day about issues because she's helping a council person, then that's what we do, and that's part of the team.
I have to ask a question of protocol. As we go through each of these items, are we going to vote on them? Are we going to
I don't think
we don't, we allow it to go along, and then tomorrow we vote on them? What happens?
We don't take a vote here. We just send a message to staff saying, okay, do we think we should go forward with this, and this is a good idea, or no? Because
well, you're the guy with experience. So
I think so, and I just asked Bailey, we're not voting on anything. He goes, no.
Yeah,
you need to send a message to staff on how we want to proceed, because if we give an inclination that we don't want this position, then we've got money we can budget somewhere else. So, we need to sort of give an idea of how we want to go to staff. Yes. And my idea, I guess, in wrapping everything up, is I think we need the position. Then we need to talk about hiring process and salary, I think. So.
This is probably a good time to bring this up. Let me remind everybody that we're in workshop circumstances, so that means that we do not take any action in a workshop, though we can see what the consensus is, and consensus is what typically directs staff. And so there's nothing wrong. I haven't really heard that there's a great consensus against this position. I have heard that there is consensus that we post it and go through a normal hiring process. Is there any other, Mr. Williams or John?
One question, and if I can ask city manager for a list of comparative salaries and job descriptions with other municipalities.
We can definitely get that to you. And like I said, Jim has already started on that, and I just happened to leave it behind. So,
help me understand, just for clarification, Jim. This was a projection of kind of a projection. You're still in the process of.
Right. We were asked to get started on the process, assuming this might be approved. But as with any position, as Mr. Longabaugh has explained, if the position is approved, then our job will be to go out and get those comparables and establish both the position description and the appropriate salary range within our current comp and class plan. And then that position would be posted and open to the public for recruitment.
I would propose that we let you do your job, and that you come back with those recommendations, and what they are, they are.
Yes, I mean, this is, once we have an understanding of what the duties and the levels of responsibility and authority are to be, then it's our job to establish the position description and for approval, obviously, establish the position description and the pay range, and once that's approved, then we would, of course, go out and open that up to recruitment.
Okay, Jim, real quick, we can make this position an appointed position if we wanted to, I believe, and then it'd go through the standard way we appoint the 4 appointed positions, like the city clerk, the city judge, city attorney here, and the city manager. But if we do not do that, since they are going to be pretty much reporting to the mayor and council, in the hiring process, if we choose to go that route through HR and everything, are we going to be included in interviews with this person or no?
I don't know the answer to your first question, not knowing your ordinances well enough. I don't know if you can add an additional appointed position, but in response to the second question, that if this person were to be hired, then you would have to establish who the appointing authority is, and certainly you would be involved in the screening and interview and selection process.
Okay. So if we don't choose it to be in an appointed position, we would still be involved in that process.
Absolutely, it's
all of us.
Whatever the title is to mayor and council, you'll be making
Yeah.
that decision.
Thank you.
I am totally against an appointed position. It should be a position that is managed by the city and not by the city mayor and council. Number one. Number two, point of clarification. And so my understanding is staff is hearing a consensus. You know, I don't know if you can really say that there is a consensus. So at the time that we see a budget come back to us, that you've taken our consensus information, are you going to be presenting line by line item to the council and mayor for vote, or is it just going to be a revised budget? If a revised budget, and those people who are not in agreement with one particular part of the budget, then we decline voting in approval of the budget? How does that work?
Well, I think what I'm hearing is that we would go back and, first of all, work with HR in terms of position description, and then that is definitely tied to the salary, and then we would, and working with the market in terms of doing that, and then define the hiring process. I mean, if it is going to go through our regular hiring process, that, yeah, definitely you all could be involved within that process. But when we bring it back, we would bring it back with a recommendation. This is this position, and this is how much.
So you're going to bring it back by line item?
Well, we would bring it back pretty much the way you see it right now. In terms, at that point we would break out the benefits, but you'd see the salary, and we can show you what the range was and who our comparable, our market was, and we'll give you all that information and say, based on that and the duties that were described, this is what it is. And then we would show you what the salary was, what the benefits were, and whatever other things that we would need, whether it's a phone, travel, kind of what you're seeing here. And that's a way we would bring it back at a follow-up meeting.
Yeah, if I can add to that, my understanding would be that this is the time that if we're going to have specific discussions, this is the day to have those discussions, that when the budget comes back, it'll be the budget that results from those discussions that we have here today and tomorrow.
Right. And go ahead.
I know it's a technicality here, but like I said, I've been here for a while. Technically, the council can't direct any employee other than the city manager, or we can't give direction to them. So if we're going to be hiring these positions, or this is going to take place, and there's going to be a shifting of Kim also to us, which I believe we're going to be directing them. Technically, I don't know if we have to change anything, Mr. City Attorney. We could get that to a later date. But technically, if we're going to be telling them what to do or setting things up and interacting with them, what's that going to do? And I think we might need to change that, because if we're going to be directly involved with them and telling them what to do, I think something needs to say that in our code, or I think that there would be trouble down the line on who they're under, city manager direction or council and mayor direction. So I think that's important.
Can I just respond just to one comment? I mean, if they're under the city manager, I can assure you, and knowing that I'm not going to be sitting here, but someone else is, if I report directly to you, I'm going to make sure that the staff that is assisting you is doing exactly what you want done. The other thing that it does do is that it really helps in terms of the interaction between the city manager's office and the mayor and council office. So that's.
So they would report to you.
Well, that's what.
Staff position would report to you.
That's what I'm saying.
It would, unless, like Joe is suggesting, that this becomes another appointed position.
No.
Is that?
I think it ought to become appointed.
It doesn't have to be appointed, but we need to change something saying that we can direct staff working for us.
Well, can I give you an example of how maybe I've done it in other places, where if I had an individual that was actually working for me but supporting the council, is basically, in the work plan, you sit down with the council members and the mayor, and you talk about what it is that you want this person to accomplish during that given year. And then even within the evaluation process, the way that I have done it before is I set up a 360 evaluation process. So then you would all comment on the performance of that individual during the year. And basically I would work with you on developing that evaluation. So, I mean, it would be, back and forth process.
Mr. Bailey?
There is a non-interference provision in our code, which expressly states that the council cannot direct other individuals other than the city manager. However, the city manager, and albeit circular, has the authority then to go to an employee and say, you are now, based upon my direction, you will take direction from city council. So, for example, this position, while it may be under the city manager has the authority to say, go ahead and take direction from the city council. So, yes, it is circular, but there is a chain of kind of direction there.
The other thing I believe is in order to set up an appointed position, we probably have to have a vote of the people. A city clerk, city attorney, and city manager and city judge are the 4 existing positions.
With regards to another appointed position, no.
No?
The council may. Off the top of my head, there's generally those that are identified: the city engineer, fire chief, police chief. But there's also then and others as needed. And I, at this point in time, I don't want to put you in a position where you're obligated to do that. So I would want to research it some more. But I think there is the flexibility to do that. However, that would require an amendment to our city ordinances.
And I agree with Mr. Alton. I don't think it should be an appointed position because that clearly causes that person to take ultimate direction from mayor and council. At the end of the day, just as the city attorney has said that the city manager can direct that employee to take direction from mayor and council, they can also rescind that direction. And so ultimately that position is accountable to the city manager.
Well, in that just coincides with what Ms. Ferreira said in light of the fact that having experienced this at other cities, you sit down with an individual, you work with the council and prepare a work plan, and that's how the mechanics of that comes together.
Well, there's a couple things, Mayor, no disrespect, but I disagree with you. I think if they're going to be under our direction, they should be under us, and they shouldn't go through a third issue. We should be able to do that. But on if that's the case, then why is it under mayor and council operating budget, and why wasn't it requested under yours?
Well,
So-
and it's under the mayor and council budget because we wanted it to reflect what actually is going to happen. I mean, it will be a position that is directly going to work for the mayor and council, so that's why it's in there. And that was the reason, same reason for putting district funds in the mayor and council budget, just wherever, the activity is happening. If they're supporting you, then we would want that cost to show there. It could be, I guess it could also be in the city manager's office, but I didn't think it was reflective of where that activity is going to be happening.
Well, if we're going to be part of a department, so-called a department of yours, just like economic development or community development or anything like that, then I don't know. If that's the case and they're not going to be under us, then I think it should go under your part of the budget. But I don't think it should be. I think it should be under ours, and I think we should be directing them. Because unfortunately, sometimes the city manager and city council members don't see things the same way. So that's just the reality of it. I'm not saying you. I'm just saying sometimes that doesn't happen, guys. So I would just say if a staff member is going to be working for us and we're going to give them direction, I think they should be under us. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
Question. You've worked in other municipalities, so is this an appointed position in other municipalities typically?
Not typically. I think in Phoenix, maybe the chief of staff might be, but no, that's not accurate because I have a friend that is now chief of staff, and she actually came out of the city manager's office to go spend like a year in Mayor Gordon's staff, and that's kind of what they do in Phoenix. They rotate the assistant city managers,
Right.
and they'll yeah.
So in Peoria, it's a chartered government,
Right.
and does it identify
They work
who
for
these people report to?
They work for the city manager.
They work for the city manager.
Exactly. They're in the city manager budget.
No.
They're actually in the council budget, but they actually report to the city manager. When I was in Peoria for the first part, they reported to me. They've reported to Grady Miller. I'm not sure who they're reporting to now. But then that was like in Peoria, I would do the 360 evaluation. So because persons are working for you, so actually you want to go back and find out how they're performing. So that there was an opportunity to do that. and also in developing the work plan. It was a joint effort. Mayor, only because it's getting late, I'm wondering, can we then go ahead and proceed with coming back with looking at the position description and the salary and talk about a hiring process, and or would you like us to put it in the parking lot? And
No parking lot on this one. We've had, there's a time for discussion and for interaction, and this is it. We've had it, and I think that that staff has received some direction through consensus and the various comments. If there's any place the staff is unclear, then I would suggest that it be clarified now, and then we'll move on.
Can I just ask something, Michael? And you said the range of the salary was 61 to 102, and 30% was in benefits, but yet the total amount is 135, and you said it was the mid-range?
The 135 also includes the $5,000 for travel and then $1,000 for those other items that are listed with that request.
That's still $89,000.
Okay, so there is additions to that. Okay.
No.
Page 76, Joe.
Yeah. Yep.
May I make
Yep.
just one last comment before we go away from the subject? That, I don't believe that we have a clear, defined consensus. I think that it is still an item that is going to be highly scrutinized, regardless of when you bring it back and what it looks like and smells like. What we need to do is, if you want to go on to other subjects, that's great. But I want to go on record that this discussion is not over. This is the time of the discussion, and rightfully so. But if we're going to kind of shorten the discussion and go on to other items, it's not finished.
Well, I'd suggest it is. That's why we're here.
Without taking a vote, you're not going to know, Mayor.
Well, I believe that we can. We've had 3 counselors that have clearly weighed in favor of the position. We've also had several people.
If I may, just some of the concerns that have been expressed by council actually are more directly related to the mechanics of how the person is going to be hired and how the person is going to be classified. In terms of a budget, that's a discussion that can occur when we talk about the budget, but any resolution to that would usually fall outside of the budget process, because all we're really doing is creating the funding for this position. There is the possibility that after you approve the budget, that the council may have an agreement that, no, we don't want to hire this person, or yes, we want to hire this person, or this will be the appropriate salary. Some of the decisions that are being discussed today, the mechanics of sorts, are really decisions that would be made at a later date. Therefore, in terms of direction, it seems as though there's somewhat of a consensus that's been given in terms of having it in the budget moving forward, but there are open-ended questions in terms of how this position, the mechanics of it, who it reports to, that kind of stuff, which now is probably not the opportunity to resolve those issues.
Okay, and I will abide by that. It's simply my position that there's a time when you just got to go forward, and everybody's, I think, weighed in on the subject. My voice has hopefully been strong and clear, and you know what I'm asking, where I'm asking for your support, so I'm willing to move on.
Okay, Mayor, Council, the next slide here is the Mayor and Council goals for 2009, and Assistant City Manager Sandstrom is going to provide an update on that information to you today.
Each of you at your seats had a manila folder placed before you at the break. We're not going to go into a lot of detail on these today because you are just receiving them today, so I wouldn't expect us to have a lot of discussion on those. These are the documents as a result of the retreat that happened back in February with Council that Lance Decker facilitated for us. 3 of the action items, and what I have included in there is on the very top is the action plan in the short-term and long-term goals that were discussed by Council, and consensus was reached on that these are the top goals for the city in the short and the long term. The second document that is in there, and one of the action items that the city manager's office said we would get back to you, is a survey of existing status on what it is that the city currently does that supports these actions, that supports these goals, that supports these priorities. What you have here is a brief survey. This does not include absolutely everything the city is doing. It is just a highlight of some of the reports, some of the documents, and some of the programs and activities that the city has ongoing that are directly tied to the priorities and objectives that council discussed at the retreat. The third item is the action plan of items moving forward. What are some of the things that the city staff and the city council will be working on together to ensure that we are implementing the goals and the priorities that were discussed at that council retreat? These are some of the items that were used as the basis for formulating the budget that was presented to you today. As the departments come through and do their presentations, you're going to see a lot of references back to some of the items that council has in here with financial sustainability, transportation, economic development, and so forth. The action plan that you see here gives you a brief description of some of these, who on staff has a primary responsibility, as well as the current status. This is something that we really want a lot of feedback from council on to make sure that we are hitting what you said from the retreat, that we are making sure that the staff is aligned with what your goals are and what your priorities are, and that we're working towards those in reporting back to you on those. The final item that is in there is the staff report regarding the current status of marketing efforts within the city. There were a lot of discussion on what different departments currently do on marketing, how those are coordinated, how those are aligned. This goes through and gives a brief summary of that, as well as ties it to a current budget item that is in there. As I said, I was just going to do a brief overview of these since you did just get them. Hopefully you'll have some time to review them throughout the day into the evening. We'll have some time to discuss these tomorrow if time allows. Otherwise, we will be coming back to you at another time to go through these. And this, as I said, is something, especially in the action plan, in the current status, that we're going to be updating and bringing back to council on a regular basis. But we do need your feedback to ensure that we are hitting what it is that you said that you wanted to see. With that, thank you very much.
Thank you. That was a great report.
Mayor and Council, the next section that we have is City Manager's Department or City Manager's Office. Again, one division, which is administration. The department provides a professional management of the Mayor and Council, organizational leadership, and implementation of your vision. What you see here is the recommended budget has increased 19%, and largely due to the next item, which would be the City of Surprise Marketing. It's a $100,000 request, and I will turn this over to Priscilla.
Mayor, Council, thank you very much. As Doug suggested, hopefully you'll have a chance to look at the report that was developed by Centra, looking at everything that we're doing currently in terms of marketing effort. And I think we do a splendid job in terms of trying to get the word out and talk about the things that we're doing. I mean, we've got communications that works very, very hard on that. We have community recreation and economic development, and they're all putting out an awful lot of things. What we're proposing is a one-time package of $100,000 to hopefully pull all those things together, coordinate the connection, and take it to the next level. In terms of economic development, we're doing some great things, and I think some coordination with how we market Surprise and what kinds of businesses we bring in would be very helpful. We are now living in a global economy. That's a reality. I mean, right now we're actually talking to a company from India that's looking to relocate in Surprise. I mean, that would have never happened, just a few years ago, and I expect that we're going to have more of those. So how do we get that word out? How do they know that Surprise is even here, and the things that they might be looking for in terms of a suburban lifestyle, a family-oriented community, a community with values, a place where they can pretty much breathe and still be very close to that urban area, where, if they're looking for whatever other opportunities are there and within a very close distance. And basically what it would do is, look to evaluate what we're currently doing. What is it that we're doing, and what can we do better? Bring in somebody that can then develop that overall marketing plan, and not only to promote what we're doing, but also to give us a distinct brand. Why would somebody? What are the things that would enhance or influence a company to come to Surprise? What is that we're about? That brand that everybody talks about, and then finally provide that implementation strategy in terms of, is what we're doing, can it just be connected, or do we need a marketing person that is bringing in all those efforts and keeping us connected? I mean, even with the things that we're doing, we miss opportunities. Sometimes we're holding an event that could very much be tied into something else, whether it's a Heard Museum or one of the West Valley Museum, or maybe something that Mark was doing, something with tennis, the tournament that brought in people, I understand, from all over the world. That would have been such a, and was such a coup, but were there other things that we could have done with that? So basically, this would just keep us competitive. And I know $100,000 sounds like a lot of money, but this is a time when you need to be competitive, because everybody else is scrambling for the same dollars, for the same opportunities, and we need to be on the cutting edge. And we need to not only be on the cutting edge, but we're spending a lot of time, a lot of resources doing these things, and are we doing it in such a way that really maximizes our efforts and brings the best for Surprise? So with that, that's our request in the city manager's office. And the way that we see it now is that it would be something that would be hopefully out of the city manager's office that would then help coordinate. And I see that Mark and Ken and John would be very involved in that whole process and making that successful.
Thank you. My comment is that marketing is very, very important in any business. And even though it might be a municipality, we need to be able to market our city. I do believe that it is an ongoing. It's just not. It's not next year. Should be a permanent position. It should continue to grow as the city grows. Okay, meaning that it's not going to go away in 2010. So the marketing position, rather than a one-time contract for $100,000, I think should be a full-time position, considerably less than $100,000, and have that grow, that salary grow as the city grows and the responsibilities grow. I don't believe that a one-time shot of $100,000 is going to fix the problem, and I don't think a person can get a real in-depth handle and pay for the position in a one-year period. I think it's going to take a little bit longer than a 1 year from the time of implementation of the marketing job to actually seeing the benefits of this marketing job.
My comment is, geez, I seem to be a doubting Thomas on all this, but based on the economic environment we're in, and frankly, I think it's going to get worse. Okay, adding a position like this or a consulting position like this for a 1 year pop seems not prudent spending, in my opinion. Okay, I would rather look at internally. We have 3 marketing efforts going on right now in this city, with the Economic Development Department, Parks and Rec, and the Communications Department. And if we really thought about pulling them together in somewhat of a, I don't know if it's a dotted line kind of reporting or whatever, to where all the marketing of the City of Surprise comes through a person. So that Coronado, when he wants to market for the Parks and Rec Department or the Rangers and the Royals, that he run it by this person, and maybe we can leverage our buying power, et cetera, by pulling the 3 departments together. I would rather take that kind of approach with our existing people, because we got some sharp marketing people in the city right now. And I think together they could work as a team. I mean, the mayor talks about the teamwork. I think would be an excellent opportunity to bring 3 departments together to work as a team, come up with a marketing plan, and then have somebody in charge of that plan somewhat. I'm just throwing this out. So.
Mayor, Council, and I don't necessarily disagree with that because I think, and probably Ken and Mark and John can speak better to that than I can because they are doing excellent work. And I know they try to coordinate as much as they can. And obviously because of everything else that they're doing, because that is not their job specifically, they are managing and operating full departments. Mm-hmm. And, sometimes with limited staffs. And so I think that if they had an opportunity where somebody could come in and kind of pull everything that they're going together, and I agree with you, a one-year shot is probably not what's going to do it, but this was an attempt to at least look at what we're doing to create, that overall plan in terms of how do we do this, and then to implement something. And I'm not saying that the city manager that follows me won't come back the following year and say, we really do need this position. And I would argue that this is exactly the time that you need that type of a position because revenues are going to get scarce and you need to be able to be very competitive and bring in those other interests that would really forward surprise. And both Ken and Mark are anxiously sitting back there and I welcome them. If they want to speak to this, they're more than welcome to do that. Mark. It's not rehearsed, by the way. They had no clue.
Mayor and members of the council today, I agree with the city manager in that there are, I call it the triangle of communication. And I believe that first of all, I've said this often in the public process, marketing is the most overused word in America. Because what's marketing to recreation is different for communications, for the communication department, and economic development messages for economic development. I mean, marketing is sponsorship development. Marketing is placement of ads. It's collateral development. I mean, you can put a list together. And from my perspective, initially I had some apprehension about this because it would be difficult, as Mr. Alton or a member here made a comment here shortly, go through one and have it work. For us, it would be challenging. You're buying advertising, and now you're having to go through another piece of the stop. Is that really productive when you have people in your department who have that expertise and have actually been gelling that for 4 or 5 years? But I think and I believe strongly that, as it's been explained to me by the city manager and Doug Sandstrom, that this is an effort to really bring this triangle together, to try and give us direction on how we can better serve all of our processes, streamline it, find out what we're doing well, what we're not doing well, and how do we improve that. To be honest with you, at first I was a little threatened by this. I'm not as threatened today because you often don't work well and effectively when you have others that aren't living your world telling you how to live your world. But this isn't what I'm being told this proposal is before you today. What it is to get Ken, myself, and there's other departments in the city that are also marketing. Police and fire do a heck of a job. And for us to all come together and understand that branding, logo development, collateral, it all has that same image and it's a positive image. And from my perspective, after speaking with Doug at great length, I'm very supportive of this because I believe that it will give us that direction. Do we need an employee to handle this? Do we not need an employee? I think we'll have direction at the end of the year.
Mark, may I ask you a question? And that is, do you think it's going to go away at the end of the year, our need? Or do you think this needs to be a full-time position for the city of Surprise?
If you're asking me my opinion, and I don't want to put Ken on the spot, but in my opinion, a position like this would really complement what Ken's team has done to date. Ken's magnificent, and his staff is brilliant. And we use and utilize Ken more today than we ever have in my 9 years here because there's competency there. And whether it's a director or a manager position, but to me, the funnel really should probably go through our communications department because he is the conduit that communicates with the world.
Right. Yeah. So you're saying that rather than hire a consultant, possibly you would be open and think it would be wise to hire an employee?
I think either would probably work. I think the comprehensive study would probably be most beneficial for us because you're absolutely right. It's not going to go away, but we need to know what we need. And we need to understand why we need it and how much it's going to cost. And then how do we bring all those pieces together to then decide, Yes, we may need a marketing division. Maybe we need a marketing department. Some cities have done it well. Others haven't done it well. I mean, Peoria is a great example of it's bounced from department to department, and now it reports to the city manager. And you really have splintered the organization, in my opinion, and we're not talking about Peoria today. So I believe that a study that would give us that direction, to simply go out and hire a marketing person, that person is going to have to come in and for 2 years try and figure out what we all do. Let's figure out if we need a person or if we need the resources to make it really work.
So the item that's before us is hiring a consultant not to do a study, but to start doing initiatives and promoting the city. I have yet to see anything that says a study.
No, basically that's what that person would do. Not only look at the needs, in terms of, what's already out there, actually come up with a marketing plan and then talk about the implementation. So, I mean, it is a study in itself in terms of the consultant coming in and evaluating everything that we're doing and how we can do better and what is it that the needs are.
So, yeah, it says here the consultant will develop a strategic plan. That's a deliverable, right, to us. And roll out implementation strategy to guide the joint efforts of the three departments.
Thank you.
So this outside person may come up with the same thing Mark came up with in saying that Ken should be the guy that kind of drives it.
Or not. I mean, yeah.
Or
and
not.
That's
Or
what
not.
we don't know.
And that's what we don't know at this point. And I'm really glad we're having this discussion, like Mark and Priscilla and everybody at the table. This is a discussion we need to have. As we evolve as an organization, we realize that there is a need for some kind of overarching theme in our marketing. And right now we don't have that. We have 3 different departments that have 3 distinct goals. Mark does a fantastic job of marketing spring training and the CRS programs. Nothing exceeds the national exposure we get than spring training does. To have Surprise Arizona in byline after byline in cities across the country and in some of the TV markets we got into this year. It's incredible what they do. Economic development has a very strategic goal in mind, and that is to attract businesses and hook businesses that are thinking of relocating here. They do a fantastic job pitching our assets. My department works hard on creating an overall image for the city that's positive, not only to our residents, but also nationally and regionally. So, how do we bring all of those things together with a strategic approach? What the manager's recommending, and that what I'm in support of today also, is that we look at some of the great firms that operate around the country that specialize in municipal marketing. Peoria just completed a really good study with a firm called North Star that'll come in, perform the scope that you have before you today, and be able to propose and suggest to us, look, our research, our discussion with your community members, our discussion with your stakeholders, our discussion with your neighboring communities, here's how you're perceived, here's how you're assessed, here's what your residents think where your residents think you should be going, and here's everything from a slogan to an actual fact-based plan to move forward. Peoria's slogan they came up with is naturally connected. That's not something that a group of staff members sat around a room and came up with. That's the result of market research and discussion. They discovered that the great unpublicized asset that Peoria has is its natural surroundings, from Lake Pleasant all the way to the south, and that the neighborhoods in the community felt they needed more natural connections, more walkability, more bike paths. You blend those things together, you come up with an image. With that image and with that slogan is associated a campaign. And the key thing I think that Councilman Alton mentioned is that we don't want a consultant to come in here, drop a plan on us, and walk away. One of the things the scope suggests, and one of the things that really good marketing firms are very good at, is coming up with measurability, accountability, and as much as a 3-year plan, including checkups, as they call them. Well, they'll come back to us and say, here's where you should be at, where are you at? Tweak, 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 continue moving us forward with a strategic approach. So I hope that it kind of expounds a little on what the proposal before you today is.
That's a very good explanation, and therefore I take back my idea of hiring an employee this year. Because I think the consultant, the marketing firms that you had mentioned is probably the best scenario. Nothing's going to get done this year other than researching and developing and looking as to a goal for us, a way to go. And that time we can hire somebody with a roadmap already in place saying, here is your job description, here's what you need to do in order to get to where we need to be. Is it my understanding the City of Surprise Marketing is not an individual but a consultant, right? So is this an RFP? Or is this we're going to be going out and?
That's correct.
Okay.
It would be an RFP, and whoever wants to apply for that type of activity can do so.
And who would be making the decision then?
Well, it would normally go through our process. We would have, I would guess that folks like Ken and Mark and John would get in a room maybe with whoever and go through review of qualifications and then come forth with a recommendation.
But on page 77 of the budget book, it does suggest a position.
If it
So
does,
we
it's,
need to-
if it's
we
if
need
it
to
does,
change
it's
that.
wrong. I'm sorry. Page
It
72.
suggests 77.
No, it just suggests
There's an additional
a
position.
marketing firm, I think. It says,
Is that
yeah,
specific
it's
kind of
not an
position?
ongoing, I don't think.
Oh, I misread it? I misread it.
Was a one-time cost.
Okay.
Part of the scope, if I'm not out of line by speaking up right now, is that as Councilman Hall pointed out, part of the scope would be to recommend financing ideas for rollout and a 3-year sustainability plan, which would include an accountability plan and processes to measure our impact and measure our success as we move forward.
Now, what Ken is reading, you don't have in hand. He had developed something that was like a draft scope.
Sorry, it says draft all over it.
It's his big old draft, Ken. No, I'm
kidding.
kidding.
Sorry.
No, but he has been working hard on it. So, I mean, when we have been thinking through that process. So, and we can share that at this point, or as soon as you make copies.
I'll get right on it.
Thank you, Ken. You did a great job. I appreciate it.
A couple things at the council retreat that we had. We talked about combining efforts of those 3 departments anyway. So hopefully that's underway. Those are some of the best people in our city as far as performing events and putting on events and stuff like that. And I constantly talk very well about most of those people there. So I want to say thank you to them. They do a very good job. But in all defense, that marketing, I think Peoria tried to change the logo, and that wasn't too well received, though, out in the city, though, I think. But as far as an ongoing thing, I think it needs to be an ongoing thing. We need to not really, I don't like the word branding, but I like image or what people, the connotation of surprise and our image of surprise. I agree that I think we need a full-time maybe position to pull these 3 together, and that's what it's going to require in the future. But right now, I think getting the firm together, as Ken suggested, and determining what it will be and what the how they need to go about it and what exactly they want, what is their goals, and how is it perceived. So I think that would be at first I was opposed to this, but I think if it's a one-time deal and then they can get it together, I think maybe they might even, the firm comes in and says, this is what you need to do, this is where we feel you need to go. And if we have staff, which I really do, I feel we have the staff, and with the slowdown especially, I think we have a little time on our hands where some staff members could do that. They're very competent in those departments, and I think we would probably find if we just reevaluated some of their job descriptions and their responsibilities that they have those talents to do that within house without going out. But the first $100,000 to spend to, and I'm not one to spend on. I really hate to say that. I'm not one to spend on consultants and everything. Everybody knows that, but for this, I think it's important that we get a professional outlook on where we need to go. And then after that, the staff, I think we have the staff to do it, and we don't have to hire anybody else, to be honest with you. So that's my 2 cents worth. Thank you.
Does that conclude City Managers? Thank you. It took a long time, though. Communications?
We have one, Mayor. We have one more here. It's the intergovernmental relations. We're going to throw that in there. This is where the budget staff gets excited because, as you can see on the slide here in front of you, There's no new items recommended to FY09, and that's because Ms. Lehman did not request any items. So she deserves to be applauded because she towed the line and did not request any additional funds.
She was too busy at the legislature.
Probably so. Should ask for
Just
10 more.
from now on, anything gets passed out, can you have it punched so that we can put it in the right place?
I have a question, and I've seen this over and over in the Council of Budget book, and that is that there's not any increases to staff, and there's not no raises. There's only a 3%. Can you go back to the last slide, please? There's only a 3% increase, or there should only be a 3% increase. Why is it 12? I see some that are flat. I see some that are 2. I see some that are minus, but they're always more than. I mean, the majority are more than, say, 8%.
A couple of reasons. One would be the cost of living increase that we talked about. Another is
3%.
The insurance increases, health insurance increases that were about a 15% increase over last year. And then the third was there's also, when you have that 3.4% COLA, there's all the associated costs like pension, FICA, all the other payroll costs as well that cause that increase. I think that the reason you see the 12% increase here is because we have 2 individuals in this department. So when we bring somebody into that department or change one person's pay in that department, it has a large impact. Whereas if that were to happen in the police department, you would barely see a ripple happen just because of the magnitude of the budget, the size of the budget.
Thank you for answering my question. I knew you would have the answers.
Next department is the communications department. Again, the divisions are PIO, broadcast, and web. They do all the wonderful things that Ken was mentioning earlier, including Surprise 11 and the city's website. We're seeing an 11% increase, no additional staff. 2 of the items that they're receiving, again, are base adjustments in supplies and services and broadcast programming. And Mr. Lynch is here to present those items.
The base adjustments we're requesting, and Mayor and members of the council, include $21,500 to operate the Granicus system. Granicus is the system that allows us to stream stream our TV channel live, present the residents on the internet with an agenda of council meetings that creates hyperlinks that will allow them to click on agenda items and go directly to the videos. The operation and maintenance of that contract costs what you see there. Associated software and hardware and tech support is included in that monthly cost. If I could have the next slide, please. The broadcast center, the $28,800 is the request before you to provide crews for an average of 2 studio productions per month. Whenever you do a studio production, a variety of positions are required. You see them there: director, technical director, audio, producer, and director, 3 camera operators, a floor manager, lighting techs, and on-cam talent. Right now, we have a full-time staff of 2 that can handle 2 to 3 of those positions per production. The other positions do require professional staffing, and a lot of cities around the valley that have Channel 11s, including where I was in the past, have a pool of money in which they hire professionals as needed to come in and do things like light a set or run cameras. That would give us an average of 2 programs a month. And those are our supplementals. How we are supportive of the council's goals in the next fiscal year, enhancing communications with citizens. We intend to stay on the cutting edge of communications tools. We've done a lot this last year. We intend to continue it into FY09. Streaming video on the internet, interactivity with our websites, the general plan site and the spring training site are currently good examples of that. On-demand municipal information where people can get to the Granicus site, for example, find out what they need when they want it 24/7. Live cable TV. We are in the process of not only making our studio live, but also of speccing out point-to-point microwave transmitters so that we can broadcast live from the vicinity of the communications center, that is, around Surprise Center. And finally, Granicus, which, thanks to Mayor Truitt and members of the council, we are getting online very quickly. We also support the broad spectrum of long and short-term mayor and council goals. When Mr. Sandstrom asked our department to submit ways to identify goals that we were supportive, we found, not to our surprise, that we were in support of all of the council's goals and had a role to play in each of the council's goals, and we look forward to continuing to do that in the next fiscal year.
Just a comment. I think I speak for all of us when when I say that your department's been doing a fabulous job. We appreciate the efforts that you've made to get each of the counselors on video and the extra programming that we're seeing on Channel 11. We look forward to some of these soon to happen changes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. We have a very dynamic staff, and all the credit goes to them. They're a great group, but I appreciate very much your comments, and I'll make sure staff knows of them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So right now, Ken, we can go on the web and click on the Surprise 11 down on the right hand, and then what?
Click on Surprise 11. You'll go to the media player. That will show you Surprise, what is on Surprise 11 now. If you were to go to the internet right now, for example, you would see this meeting.
You would see this meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
Then you change the channel.
And then you change the channel.
Therefore, Ken, we've had Granicus installed for some time.
What we're broadcasting now is part of the implementation of Granicus. The city clerk and I met with Granicus representatives yesterday. The next council meeting on the 24th will be kind of our dress rehearsal with the full system. I say that in a public meeting, even though we're not really ready to go public with it yet. It's kind of our chance to see how it goes, but we're getting much closer to full implementation.
Thank you.
Ken, I wanted to say thank you. I know I compliment you guys a lot, but the way I look at things and evaluate the city and transfer my opinions to the city manager and the council, I try to look at how far it's come since each individual department head has taken over. And I got to say, your department and the job you've done from when you've taken over to what it is now is just tremendous. I can't thank you enough. It's definitely got a much more positive image out there, a much more professional image of Surprise. We talk about trying to be more professional, and everything you do, the Progress Magazine, the TV shows, what the programming on there is. And so I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of me and the city for really doing a great job. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilman. As the mayor said, we're a team here, and everything we do in communications, I couldn't do anything without the support of Assistant City Manager Kathy Rice and the City Manager's office. They greenlight everything we do, and they've been very supportive and encouraging and given us a lot of great ideas. It's a great team to be part of. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next up, Mayor, City Attorney's Office. 2 divisions, civil and prosecution. They keep us out of trouble, and they also get people in trouble when they commit crimes. Additional
we do
staff,
what we can.
No additional staff is being recommended at this point. They do have one recommended item, that would be base adjustments for outside legal services. And Mr. Bailey, go for it, please.
With regard to our request, we're looking at outside counsel. We want to have the flexibility, as other legal departments do with other municipalities, the flexibility to allow us to retain firms for specialized services. Also, moving forward at this point in time, collection efforts, that's something that we may want to step up moving, and also have this additional resource that's available to us. If you go to the next slide, Mike. What our goals are that we're moving forward with regards to council direction. First and foremost, we want to create some more intellectual infrastructure in the department. There's been a significant amount of turnover in the city attorney's office, and what this is doing is creating that additional infrastructure. It will also allow us the opportunity to create more internal policies and procedures, in addition to assisting the council with their policies and procedures as well. Training. Additionally, there'll be the training that we want to provide to the attorneys. And then finally, economic development. One of the primary goals for the council has been economic development. And we put down Scrivener versus entrepreneurial. Generally, you'll find attorneys that are very Scrivener in the sense that they're very captured in the document. They're very focused in the document. In light of the goals of economic development by the council, we want to be more of an entrepreneurial, have the flexibility, go out, assist the departments, be more of deal makers as opposed to, we want to be deal makers as opposed to roadblocks. And using specialized outside counsel can assist us in that. Thank you.
Well said, well said. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Mayor and Council, the next department deals specifically with a Scrivener, and that would be the city clerk. One division, general operations, again, supports of the staff, Mayor and Council through minutes, also does the coordination of the activities for meetings and agendas, and it's the chief elections officer. No additional staff is being recommended. However, we're seeing a slight decrease in her department. That would be moving some. Oh, okay. The cost associated with Kim Davies' position from the clerk's office. We are seeing a base adjustment of one time of $50,000. And Ms. Aguilar, could you please discuss that?
I didn't hear the last part of what you just said. I'm sorry.
Just need an explanation of your base
Okay,
adjustment.
that would be, well, I don't want to jinx us at this point, but just in case we had to have a special election, there's many reasons why we would have to have a special election, so we want to prepare for that just in case. And so we're budgeting $50,000 at this time.
That was something that kind of jumped out at me, and I just wondering why that would be if we had to do that. Now, the next election is the general election in November of next year.
That's correct.
And if we were to proceed with the GO bond, then that would be the time that we would do that.
That is correct. We would have to.
Not this. No, there would be year
No.
after.
November.
It would be 9. So it wouldn't be the general election.
It would be calendar year 2009, November 2009. It would be a
It
general
wouldn't be a
election.
presidential election. It would be.
However, that
That would-
$50,000 that's in the budget also does cover the general election that is coming up in November. If any do we have any costs associated with that from the city perspective? If we had
Unless
to
we have
add
a ballot
anything
issue.
into it, that would cover that.
Okay. So the only thing that we really do have going for us is a re-election or the election of 2 city council persons.
Not until the following year.
Not 9, isn't it?
9.
09.
It would be September, November 09.
You're thinking there might just be a possibility of 2.
There's always a possibility with recall, referendum, and issues.
Yes. I understand. Thank
Didn't
you.
want to mention the R word, but.
Referendum,
We always have
right?
a
Thank you very much.
Referendum, right?
Referendum, yes, thank you.
No.
You made me say it, Richard.
I didn't see it.
Sherry, would you like to also review some of the goals and objectives for next year?
Our, financial sustainability, ensure effective and efficient delivery and services. We have a project that is through Iron Mountain. We're working with Iron Mountain right now to make sure that we are in compliance with records management. And we have a citywide project going on with, right now we have community development, engineering, of course the clerk's office, to store a lot of our records off-site. So we've been able to get rid of a lot of our paperwork by a recycling project as well. And of course, we take care of all the main city records of the city. We have all of our documents scanned on Laserfish currently, and that's one of our ongoing projects that we've had for the last 6 or 7 years.
Sure. Do we have a redundancy? Are we taking photocopies of everything, paper that comes in, and keeping it on microfiche or a CD or something like that?
Yes, we have both microfilm and through Laserfish, so we have a backup for all of our documents.
Okay. Thank you.
Sherry, I have a question. I know that year 2010 is our 50th anniversary and that you are in the process of bringing together our history. And are we properly budgeted for that?
No, we are not. There's
What-
no money currently budgeted for the history of Surprise.
Okay, and we need to. That's an important milestone. So is that something, Michael, that might be a council contingency item when we can identify what that budget's going to require?
Mayor, if we can get that cost identified this year, it would be a preference of our staff to have that taken out of council contingency, yes.
Thank you very much.
Sherry, the moving Kim to us, where was she planned as a full-time employee under your?
She's always been located in the clerk's office in prior years.
Right, so shouldn't it have been reflected in here and then put over to here, where it would have been 0, but last year was 1?
Councilman Johnson, it's in fiscal year 2008. We're taking care of it this year, so it won't reflect as a plus or minus at this point.
All right, but I guess the movement is she will no longer be under your budget.
That's correct.
She will go to council budget or
City manager.
or manager budget, whichever we say here. Okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you.
The next department is the finance department. I am not the finance director. I'm the budget director. So Robert Nillis will be sitting at the seat here. Again, 3 divisions: administration, revenue, and accounting. They do the bonding, the borrowing, utility billing, sales tax, payroll, things of that nature. For the finance department this year, there's a recommendation of 2.5 full-time equivalent positions. One of those will be funded out of the general fund. The others have offsetting revenue or are funded out of the enterprise fund. Again, here's some of the recommended items. One-time ongoing shows you the breakout, and I'll let Mr. Nillis explain those items.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. It's nice to address you here this afternoon. It is this afternoon now. As mentioned, the Finance Department has a number of initiatives that are identified for this year. Most of them basically relate to maintenance of service, but we have broken them into certain areas. Among those items is a potential bond rating, which was identified. If the bond election does not happen this fiscal year, if it doesn't happen in November of 2008, then those funds will not be needed, and they'll be moved back into the general fund or into the general operations of the city. Those numbers do not include things like printing costs and other items should you decide to go forward with a bond election in November of 2008. Other items that are included in our budget requests were basically accounting maintenance related. There was about $25,000 authorized in the budget for software improvements and upgrades. We will be coming up with a list of items. We had put together a list, and we'll be prioritizing that for the use in development of our financial systems. In addition to that, there was also a senior accountant position authorized in the budget. That position will be used primarily for tracking purposes related to development agreements and special districts. We have about 70 street lighting improvement districts. We have the Community Facilities District at Marley Park. There are about 3 or 4 additional CFDs, as they're called, that have been requested, and nothing has been turned in at this point in time, but as those get turned in, those will have to be tracked as well. In addition to that, on the utility side, we have 1.5 positions. One is related to a utility accountant. That position is actually funded out of water services. It will continue to do maintenance of service efforts that are currently being monitored with Arizona American. And as we begin a transition process away from Arizona American in the near term, this position will also work to help coordinate that transition of effort. The other is a person for utility billing. That position is requested to move from half-time to full-time, and it has an offset of the revenue that's projected to be generated from that position. That will basically take and do increase enforcement on the business license side of the activities. And then the last thing, which actually isn't shown on the chart there, was a contract for sales tax auditing services. And that has a zero basis cost to it because it's anticipated that any costs incurred by doing sales tax will be offset by the revenue generated. And I'll dispense with the rest at this point in time. So, as far as goals and objectives, the Finance Department's basic service and charge is financial sustainability. So thank you for making that the #1 priority, because everything we do pretty much falls into that category.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Was too easy, Robert.
Mayor and Council, I'm going to go sit at this seat over here so Jared can introduce.
The next department we have is management and budget, divisions of budget, risk management, purchasing. The responsibilities generally are the annual budget that we're doing here. 5-year capital plan, we'll be working on that tomorrow. Loss control, which falls under risk management. Safety administration, disability awareness is also under risk management. And then we have the RFPs and the IFBs that fall under purchasing, the request for proposals, and the IFBs are...
Invitation for bids.
There we go. Thank you. For the recommended budget for fiscal year 2009, the budget is $4.2 million, an increase of 5%. FTEs are staying at 17. The item recommended is the continuation of the one-time ADA Enhancement Fund at $300,000. And with that, I will turn it over to the Director, Michael Schrock, Jr.
Thank you, Jared. The item we've requested this year is $300,000, and again, that is recommended as part of the Disability Advisory Commission's action plan or strategic plan. Each year, the group has these funds available to enhance current facilities or new facilities so that there's a seamless transition from items that are ADA compliant and actually make them more accessible. And so this $300,000 has been put to use over the past few years, albeit we haven't spent the entire amount. We are targeting to spend a significant amount of the funds over the next fiscal year. If you could move the next slide there, Jared. Unless there's questions.
Is there anything identified specifically? Is that coming to us, or is that what you were referring to earlier? That there was a list coming to us? Is ADA enhancement been identified by project?
There's an ADA audit that currently exists.
There is.
That's something that staff is currently working on with Community Recreation Services, the Facilities Department, or the Facilities Division of Public Works. We're working towards completing the ADA audit and making sure that all city facilities are compliant. This is funds that are new funds allocated by the city for one-time use to then take opportunities to enhance sidewalks, make them from 4 foot to 6 foot, or put in automatic door operators where they don't necessarily exist right now, or create a family restroom where there may just be a regular men's and women's restroom. So those are the types of projects that we've been focusing on. The next fiscal year, we're really looking at targeting playgrounds as something that we want to make them more accessible to all the residents and all the children with disabilities so that they can have access to those on an ongoing basis.
Okay. All right.
Oh, yes. As I've been noted by the Assistant City Manager, any of the funds that would be expended out of that $300,000, we were going to bring, if there's significant dollar amounts, we're going to bring those back to council. And what we also do is we provide a report to the council on a quarterly basis. So that's something that will come before you on a regular, ongoing basis. Goals and objectives, again, financial sustainability. Appreciate that being a very important strategic goal for all of you. Again, budget monitoring, forecasting, putting together this year's budget, next year's budget, making sure that we are structurally sound as a city in a financial sense. That's a goal for us. Will continue to be, even if it wasn't a goal for the council, we want to make sure that we're doing that on a regular basis. We want to make changes to the purchasing processes as far as making sure they're tightened up, making sure that people are trained in those processes, because that will also ensure financial sustainability. We don't want to make mistakes. We don't want to do things wrong or incorrectly that are going to cost the city money in the long term. So delays, we don't want delays or anything like that. So that efficiency improvements are important for us. The general obligation bond. The Management Budget Department has been tasked with facilitating that process for fiscal year 2010. So over the next year, we will be working with you to help develop a plan or a course of action to get the citizens involved, make sure that we get the resident input, we get the council input to have a document that's reflective of your needs and the citizens' needs, so that when an item goes to the ballot, if the council desires to do that, that it's something that has their buy-in and it sells itself. That's the important thing. Citizen engagement, again, increased disability awareness. We're doing constantly doing training with the disability advocate. We're reaching out to the community through the Northwest Access program, where we're going out to businesses, doing an inventory of what, if they're accessible, and then giving them some type of rating, and then putting that guide online so that people can see that. There's a wealth of opportunities for businesses to have those people come in and shop there. So again, you want to make your business as accessible as possible. And again, the general obligation bond absolutely has to have citizen engagement if it's going to be successful. That's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry. If a restaurant or whatever is non-compliant, is the city responsible for funding so that they are compliant, or is that private?
It's a private
business?
issue. It would not receive city funding.
Is there a fining process that goes along with when they're not compliant?
If there's a complaint given to the Department of Justice, that's the process it goes through. It goes through a federal process.
But we would have not signed off on that, on any permits that did not bring them in compliance, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Schrock. You may leave. Up next, we have Human Resources. The visions are people, employment, and people development. Their general responsibilities are recruitment, compensation, classification, personnel policy development, training, performance management, and investigations and disciplinary actions. Their budget for fiscal year 2009 is nearly $1.5 million, a 6% increase over the previous fiscal year. The FTEs are staying at 12. The recommended items include base adjustments of about $21,000. There's a performance evaluation management software at $60,000 or $70,000, and training and development, which is actually going to be transferred from the current base that's located in general operations. And with us today, the director, to speak about the items.
Bowers, if you please.
Good afternoon. Of course, I've only been here for a few months, so I wanted to thank April Reynolds and Margaret Ewing and Assistant City Manager Sandstrom and Michael Schrock for helping me with this budget. That was already in process, and I had very little impact and probably just messed things up, so I appreciate their help in bringing all this forward. The base adjustments that we are requesting, first of all, have to do with supplies and services. We've had over the past 4 or 5 years with our increased, with the increasing work that we're doing in regard to recruiting, a lot of increased cost, mailing, advertising, also increased cost in the much improved new employee orientation process that the city developed. And also, as we move to the new City Hall, we will be purchasing and implementing a new badging system that we are responsible for actually creating. So those are some of the items that are involved in the base adjustments that you see there also. The second item, as they pointed out, training and development. This is an extremely important priority for us. We will be developing both an annual training program for our employees and specifically for our supervisors, an integrated supervisory training series, and then also a skill-focused employee training program having to do with computers and other things that are skill sets that need to be offered training for across the city. And actually, there'll be no budget impact for this, but there will be some transfers from other departments to our budget to oversee and make consistent this process across the city. Another item that will be implemented this year is a web-based software product to allow our management staff to oversee and consistently apply our performance evaluation and performance management processes. There's a one-time cost this year to implement that, and then an ongoing cost for a hosted web-based system to assist us with performance management. And as far as relative to council goals, our job and our effect on the overall council goals, of course, is to support our departments in order for them to be able to meet the goals and objectives of the city. And specifically in regard to that, this next fiscal year, our important priorities as a department will be to complete the update to our employee policies and guidelines. Secondly, to implement, using both the software and other tools, implement a performance management process across the city. Third, to begin the implementation of our employee and supervisory training program. And also fourth, to complete the implementation of a project that had started a year and a half or 2 years ago, and that is a web-based hosted HRIS software system we use to compile and to mine all of the information for our employees. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
Thanks, Jim. Great shirt. Love the shirt.
That's about the 12th comment I've gotten, and I really appreciate the support. I just wanted to be positive and have fun today. You know,
looks great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mayor and Council, the next department is Information Services or Information Technology. 3 divisions there. Responsibilities, help desk, land acquisitions, map creation, distribution, keeping our computers running so I can make presentations like this. No additional full-time equivalents are recommended for the FY09 budget. However, there's a 15% increase in their recommended budget. Items that are being recommended include the following. I'll let Mr. Jackson get into more details of those items.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council and City staff. The base adjustment costs were reasonably large this year, as you can see. That was mainly caused by increases in software costs. Those are there wasn't any increase in additional software or additional products, but the cost for products from Microsoft, Adobe, Symantec all went up tremendously this year, and that was probably for every other organization in the nation. The City of Surprise is an organization that values technology. This budget in information technology certainly supports that vision. The other base adjustments, we had increased costs in service agreements. Those are the maintenance of our hardware and sometimes our software, besides the software licenses. And that somewhat came into effect because we brought more products online. The public safety building brought in quite a few more switches and routers, and hate to get too technical here, but there's more stuff to both pay for and manage. We also had a fairly large increase in telecommunications cost. $110,000 of this telecommunications cost is a temporary charge that we expect to go away in 2010 after we move into the new City Hall. But it's to support a fiber connection between this building and the new City Hall campus. The other fairly large expenditure was an upgrade and increase in capacity to our storage area network. Storage area network is the bucket that all the data in the city is stored in. We have been, over the last few years, moving information into this large SAN that is more capable of expanding and contracting as services are needed within the city. Our current capacity is about 14 terabytes, and just for your information, about 40% of that space is taken up by GIS data and aerials. And you've all seen the excellent aerials that the GIS department puts out, and that kind of leads into the last item, the GIS aerials, and we have a cooperative agreement with Maricopa County and some of the other municipalities to fly new aerials every year, and we had to add $25,000 to that. We currently paid $50,000, and next year it'll cost $75,000. The goals that we have within information technology to tie to your goals are, the short term is downtown development. As an anchor tenant of the what I call the Surprise Center area, we have brought in very high-speed fiber, and we have co-location capability in the facilities that we've installed. That is added to the economic development positioning through our Surprise Connects program and our infrastructure that we brought into all the areas of Surprise. Long term is certainly an image of being innovative. We have very large dreams, and we want to continue that as we move along. Surprise Connect supports that. And also, there's such an important mission to preserve the environment, especially around Aux 1, and maintaining the Luke mission. So, any questions?
Thank you.
Randy, do you have a list of the maps that you provide of the city in your GIS
How many?
department?
Actually, I don't have a list.
Oh.
It's probably in the thousands.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
We do, I would say, 50 new maps a week at the request of both citizen requests and council requests and staff requests.
Okay. How would I take a look at those?
Okay, you can.
Ability is.
Mike,
Mayor,
can we
if I,
speed this up
yeah,
just
if
a
I
little
may
bit?
suggest we either break or we want to go to
I want
12:30.
to try to aim to be done by 12:30.
Here we go then. Next up
Thank you.
will be economic development. I just remind John, be brief, please. No, it's an additional 0.2 FTE who is being recommended for this next year's budget. John, go for it and talk about your items.
Great, thank you. Pleasure to be here, Mayor and Council. And I'm happy to report the economic development budget is really in pretty good shape for the upcoming year. And we're fully staffed, which is something I haven't been able to say until this year. So things are really humming, and our caseload has been markedly increasing. So actually kind of here to give you a positive message, because I think we hear a lot of doom and gloom about the housing market, but the commercial market, in Surprise right now, is definitely picking up. And just to give you a quick example, our own number of new inquiries went from 252 the previous year to 378 this year, so it's about a 40% increase, so it's really good. We have a couple of items that are that I'd like to just briefly talk about. One is that, as you all know, we have a small business, kind of startup business program managed by a guy named Al DeAngelis, who is a retired businessman. He's budgeted currently for 20 hours a week, but through salary savings, he's never worked less than about 28 to 30 hours a week. Well, because of the tightening budgets, we won't have that salary savings next year, so we're asking that we just budget the extra 10 hours, and that's what the base adjustment for personnel is the 18.4 to do that. And I can't say enough positive about him, and so we're hoping you'll approve that. The other two items are actually tied together. The first, this base adjustment on supplies and services, is the remaining quarter in a contract that we have currently executed at the direction of the council for the Surprise Regional Chamber of Commerce. This is a contract that is out of phase with our fiscal year, so it started in October, and we're paying 3/4 of it out of our current budget, and then the next quarter would come out of the budget that we're describing here today, and that's $12,500. So that would end in September of 2008. So we need that to complete this current contract that we have already executed. Then,
excuse me,
yeah.
I have a question. So do we have? Is the contract ongoing? Do we pay?
Oh, it's a one-time
to get them here, correct?
It's a $50,000 contract that we have executed. There is an expectation that they will be back for more, and I'll get into that in a second. But right now we have a $50,000 contract. 37.5 of the budget is in this year's budget. 12.5 is in next year's budget, and that's what the 12.5 is, to appropriate those funds to fulfill that obligation for next year.
Yeah.
Then we have had discussions with them, and I think we anticipate that they will be coming back in the beginning of the fiscal year at your direction to apply for another year's contract. And this last item then, Chamber of Commerce contract, is to put some money in the budget that, should you choose to award them a second year's contract, there would be money to fund it. But they will have to come back with a program of work, with a proposal to the council. Then if you approved it, it would get executed, but the money would be in the budget to do it, if you follow that. There's kind of two actions.
Yeah, I do. However, what it really does say to the Chamber of Commerce is that we've got money for you. Come back and apply. And I don't know if that's a message we want to send. However, that's fine. Have it in the budget. Should it get approved? But it's going to be under big scrutiny.
Yeah, and I think they understand. They've been given that message already. Yeah.
Increase in dues for Westmark, Technopolis, and GPAC. Technopolis and GPAC. Who's increased?
Well,
you got it all under
that was a
three.
request, but that's not in the budget.
Those items weren't
They weren't
recommended as
approved?
part of the
They're
city
not
manager's.
approved by the city manager.
They were.
It's not part of the recommendation.
Those,
Well,
those
no, that's
amounts.
good.
Those amounts were either going to be absorbed in the current base that they had, or
Okay.
in the current base budget, if that was going to occur.
Well, how about the same thing with them? Aren't they coming due? Where are they in the
Absolutely.
budget? Okay, where's that in the budget then? How much is GPEC?
GPEC itself is, I believe, it was only going to be $600, $700. That's based on population. Technopolis, yeah.
Yeah.
Where is it?
Yeah.
It would be under our.
How much is it in the base budget?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. I have to find it. We have a line item. I think it's called dues and memberships. It's a $50,000 line item, and it would be included in there.
Okay. That'll come under some scrutiny too, I think.
Yeah, and that's something where they have to come back and it's part of a contract again. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, and thank you. We're going to do one more, and then hopefully that won't take us too long. Then we'll break for lunch. Take a 20-minute break for lunch.
Mayor, Council, we have community development, multiple divisions there: administration, building safety, code enforcement, development services, and planning and zoning. As you can see, there has been a reduction of 6 full-time equivalent positions from this department. There has been a 0% increase or decrease for the department. Assistant City Manager Rice will give the presentation on these items that are moving forward.
Yes, I'm very proud of the people in the department as they looked around and saw that we were decreasing in the amount of inspections and other things and had not hired people that were in the budget when they didn't need them. So we were able to reduce those positions by 6, but we asked that $50,000 be put in the budget should we need temporary services, particularly in commercial. We won't use them unless we need them, but it avoids putting a person on staff that we may not need. The general plan updates, these are required by law that we update the general plan. We're in the process of doing it. You're familiar with those. Along with that will be a development code update and comprehensive long-range planning. This fits with your goals of sustainability and how we want the city to grow. One of the things that you're recommending, that the city manager is recommending to you, is the village planning program. We have a small amount of money in that. We'd like to look at the state lands around the white tanks and be in line with state lands so that we can plan that area for them. We're asking for money in code enforcement, which may or may not be an officer, but in services. The revitalization plan requires a lot of code enforcement in some areas, and we want to beef that up there, both in programmatic and with potential staff. Our short-term goals, downtown development, certainly are involved in the development agreements and making sure that Stadium Village meets your plan, as well as Surprise Center. We are very concerned about smart growth, and all of our activities are really related to that. Our long-term goals are working with transportation, both transportation planning and public transportation, and finalizing Loop 303. And economic development, we're really interested in looking at a housing plan, and we'll be working with the revitalization committee to look at the status of our housing in the whole city. We've asked revitalization as part of the 10% set aside. Right now there's $40,000 in there. We've asked for another $20,000 because we think $60,000 will give us a really good beginning of a housing strategy. And we know that affordable housing and other things are exciting to this council. Annexations, we will be looking particularly at state lands because a lot of the lands left in the area to be annexed are state lands.
Mayor and Council, just a point of clarification. In your book, it shows code enforcement officer. We are not recommending a position at this time. It's just a lump sum of dollar amount, and it's actually being recommended to be funded from the 10% set aside.
Okay. I would like to take that one little bit forward, if I could. In view of the tremendous problem that we have with foreclosures and vacant homes and the hard hit on the HOAs, and not necessarily the HOAs, but the neighborhoods, the individual neighborhoods and the rest of the homeowners that are on the same street as 3 or 4 or 5 foreclosures, the property values continue to fall because of the comps associated with the foreclosures. However, what we could do is we could sustain the property. And I think that a code enforcement, a minimum of one, as soon as we can, and that is to go around and look at the blight that is going on within the neighborhoods. And if code enforcement deems it necessary to have the ability to go out and contract with outside labor and slap a lien on that house so as to get paid back, but at least keep the property in an attractive manner, okay, and not tearing down the rest of the community because of some misfortunes of other individuals.
Sure. Well, we are looking at several opportunities to do things like that, one of which is a change in our ordinance, which would require, if there's a realtor, that they clean up the building, and that's what Avondale does. There are a lot of things that we can do that may not cost us a lot of money, but we need to put those ordinances in place. And certainly we're looking forward to working with the committee that you've put together along with Councilmember Williams to identify those things that we can do, and this money could be used for that.
And I just want to go off of what Councilman Alton said. I'd requested 2 code enforcement officers in the budget. I would like a better understanding of what the consultant would do, because I'm all about making an individual's job more efficient. And I think, is that what we're looking to do here? Because some of the questions that I've inquired with staff are, what are the roles of the current 4 officers? What are we doing there? And they're divided into sections within the city, and they have all the roles. In some municipalities, it's this person is signs and this person is abandoned properties or whatever that might be. My request was for 2 officers. That might not be needed, but what I would like to see is the officer, the original request processed, and then I would like to see the additional 100,000 for as requested by the revitalization approved. And if it's not through this, then perhaps through the fiscal year 08 contingency fund, we can utilize that money now and apply that now, and then in 09 approve this officer and move forward. And that's what I would like to see, and I'd like to open that up for discussion.
Yeah, I totally agree. You well stated, John.
What? We have 8. We have senior inspectors, building inspectors, code enforcement inspectors. You guys are talking about code enforcement inspectors, but I don't know. A lot of these, like you said, are going to be repoed houses. They're going to be banks are going to own them. Certain entities are going to own them, and I just think it's. I don't know what putting more code enforcement inspectors out there is. They're gonna. We've slowed down a little bit, so. I know the foreclosures are probably going through the roof, but 4 of them are, I don't know, I think they can do an adequate job. I'm concerned with the building inspections where you want $50,000 to hire an outside consultant. Currently we have 9 and 6 are suggested. Is that correct? Or we had
that we're taking away 6 inspectors
Okay.
that have not been filled, but we asked that $50,000 be placed in the budget. So if commercial goes higher than we think, we'd be able to hire somebody, a consultant part-time.
Can we train our inspectors?
We have inspectors who can handle the workload now. This is simply if the workload goes a little higher, so we don't have to add a full-time employee, but hire a firm who does this for a living.
Okay. All right. I guess it was a little misleading. I thought it was for. It says funds to be sort of special needs is what it sounded like. And I was going to say I hope we would rather spend that money and educate our inspectors.
Now that's
or
a,
building codes.
and we will be doing that. We will be working with our inspectors so they can switch back and forth from commercial to residential as the need arises. But this is just for temporary if things pick up and we hadn't anticipated it, so we don't have to hire another employee.
Do we have our it says some commercial inspections require specialized certifications. My question is are our inspectors, do they have those special certifications? And if they don't, what I'm saying is I think better spending of the $50,000 is to make sure our inspectors have those special qualifications.
We have different inspectors with different certifications. And right now, the inspectors with those certifications for special building qualities, commercial buildings, can handle the workload.
Okay.
This is simply if we would not spend it unless the workload changed.
Okay, and I guess my thing is rather than go out and hire more consultants or someone else to do it, if we found we needed that, I would think we could hire another one with the special certifications.
And we do provide ongoing education so that people can get certified.
All right, thank you.
If you say you have that $50,000 in reserve in case you need it, in that case, if you do have to use it, would the permits and what have you pay for itself at that time?
Potentially, yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
And just going off of Councilman Johnson's comments, in reference to building officials, the vacant code compliance supervisor, that's different from code enforcement. And for me, when we were talking about marketing, with the current market, an additional code enforcement officer might enable us to market better communities, safer communities. And when I talked to Chief Hughes, code enforcement is the first line of defense. And I think this could be, as we continue to grow as a city, all our departments will continue to expand, and I don't think this would be a wasted position in the long term.
My comment on that is, John, maybe we can make that an agenda item. We'll ask for it to be an agenda item, and then perhaps take that thought of council contingency and get this position filled as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are now going to take a 23-minute break, back at 1 o'clock.
Cold sandwich.